Microphones?
It's on.
Mic's on. Okay.
Ready? Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Board of Standards and Appeals, January 13th, public hearing for 2015. We'll begin with the special order calendar, decision items. Item number 1, 4208BZ, 182 Reade Street, Brooklyn.
Is Mr. Platnick going to come up for this? We're just going to deal with the adjournment. Okay.
Jessica. Jessica.
Hi, Jessica Rubenstein on behalf of Eric Platt.
Hi. Is adjournment to the 17th of February is what you asked for, or with the submission on the 10th?
Okay. Thank you.
New cases. Item number 2, 71728BZ, 5258 East 87th Street, Manhattan. Who's presenting, Melanie?
Good morning. My name is Melanie Myers. I'm an attorney with Reade, Frank, Harris, Shriver, and Jacobson, representing Allen's Garage, LLC. We're here for an action related to a site that located at 152-158 East 87th Street on the south side of the street, east of Lexington Avenue. The application before you is an amendment under zoning resolution section 11-412, and it's an amendment to a variance that was issued by the Board of Standards and Appeals in 1929 that allowed for a 6-story, 515-space parking garage. Next slide. This is the existing condition. What the amendment would do would be to reduce the height of the garage by 3 stories and would reduce the number of spaces within the garage to 150. As the chair noted at review session yesterday, the application would reduce the degree of nonconformance and noncompliance of the existing condition, and what it would do would be to facilitate above that garage a as-of-right residential project that was approved. The action was approved by resolution of the community board earlier last year. Next slide. So as I said, what the application would do would be to continue to have a garage on the site and would allow for residential as-of-right development above it. It would be about 60 units in the as-of-right development. And there were a couple of questions that we heard at the hearing yesterday that we wanted to respond to, and then we'd be happy to answer any other questions. I think the first question related to the floor area of the site, and we'll work and make sure that our numbers are consistent throughout. The one thing I did want to note was that the project itself is about 139,600 square feet, of which about 120,000, a little less, would be residential, and a little more than 20,000 would be the parking. The site, though, does share and always has shared a site with another building on the site. So overall, from a zoning standpoint, there's going to end up being about 156,500 square feet. So the zoning sheets that are in the application reference that larger number, but the project itself is a bit smaller. I think the other question had to do with sort of the treatment of the rear yard and a mezzanine area. And I think the slide that we have here and a couple of additional slides might explain the situation. So under the existing conditions, let me see if I can actually do this. So under existing conditions, it's a little hard to see, but there is an existing structure that extends to the lot line at the bottom that has a height of about 19 foot 6 inches. That's an existing condition, and sort of within that space, there is a mezzanine level or a second sort of story that's sort of nestled within there today as an existing condition. Existing conditions after that, above that sort of first story and a half height, it sets back to about 10 foot 6. So this is again, I'm not really great at holding these things.
You can take
Take
the
the mic
mic
with you, Melanie.
Okay,
the
that
mic
would be
and
great.
point.
Okay, thanks. So this is after this first part, about 19.6, it steps back a little more than 10 feet. And then what happens today is there are 6 stories that rise up. So sort of 10 feet away from the from the rear lot line today. With this application, the part that is about 10 feet away will be reduced from 6 stories to 3 stories. And then the building and the residential portion that is located above it will be 30 feet away from the rear yard.
So basically that sort of fat or slice, that'll be removed 2 stories of that will be removed.
3 stories of that will be removed.
Okay.
We have a plan, but maybe we should jump ahead too and show it in section. So,
Yeah.
again, sort of the existing condition goes up to this point here, 19, so it's again about 19.8 at that point. And then what had happened is the building went up this high, about 10 feet away from the rear yard. And now, once you get above the garage on the 3rd story, you'll have a 30-foot rear yard. And then in that space that's sort of in the back right there, that would be used for the garage support for, I think we're hoping to be able to use it for lockers and storage area for the garage. And those were the questions we heard. We're happy to take any additional questions.
Did you have other questions about that?
No, actually, that satisfied my question. I'm the one who had the question about exactly what was happening at the rear yard. It wasn't clear on, you've got a shaded plan that shows, I guess, at the second floor level, and perhaps the newer submission actually cleared it up a little bit
Yes,
better.
and so that's actually this space here.
Yeah, I
So
wasn't
you have
clear
to
what it
step
was.
down from the second to get to that spot.
Okay, great, thank you.
And just a clarification, there are 143 spaces that'll be retained? Is that
There's
right?
143, but then there's 9 reservoir spaces.
Oh, okay.
So that's how I get
So, and what I understand, there was a submission from a community association that you actually negotiated to get that number with the community.
You know, it was interesting. We had some informal discussions with the community board, and they actually encouraged us to increase the amount of parking in the space. So we had started out with our original application had about 90 spaces, and so they asked for it to go up. And then one of the things that we had heard at the community board, even though it wasn't part of their resolution, was that it would be great, you know, for you to reach out to some of the community boards. So the applicant's been working with the 86th Street Neighborhood Association, which is, I think, who sent the letter.
Okay. Okay. Any other comments, questions? Are there any speakers on this item? Okay, so other than making the correction to the statement of facts with respect to the zoning floor area, or maybe it's just clarifying the difference between what's the full zoning lot and all of that sort of stuff, and just clarifying about the rear yard condition on the drawings. That's really all that we need, and I think we can close this. Yeah?
Okay, thanks very much.
Sure. So for a motion to close?
Chair Perlmutter?
Aye.
Vice Chair Hinkson?
Aye.
Commissioner Montanez?
Aye.
And
Commissioner
for-
Otley Brown?
Aye. Sorry. You weren't here last week, I'm sorry. It's okay. And so for a decision on the 27th? Is that okay? Or is that too? Sorry?
January 27th?
Yeah, on January 27th. Is it? It's okay.
Okay, it's submission date,
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I forgot about the submission date. Yeah, so the submission would be then, can you submit by the 20th on? Yes, okay, submission on the 20th.
okay. Item number 3, 17279BZ, 16704 Northern Boulevard, Queens.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners, staff. My name is Alfonso Duarte. I represent the owner in filing this application to request an extension of the term of variance for an office use in a one-story building with accessory parking. The site is located on 167th Street and Northern Boulevard, excuse me, in the town of Flushing, County of Queens. The original zoning for the site was business until 1947, when it was changed to residence use. The owner purchased the property in '57, and in 1979 wanted to enlarge the building and applied to the board for a variance, which was the first variance that was granted. There were 2 subsequent variances, one in 1990 and one in 1999 that were granted. Besides asking for the extension of the variance, we'd like to either modify, omit, or revise some of the conditions that were imposed by the board. In 1979, one of the conditions that were imposed was that if there was a change in ownership, an application would have to be filed with the board. And in 1990, an additional stipulation was put in that if the operator changed, that an application would have to be filed with the board. Our contention is that I don't think the board is interested whether the present owner, who's a real estate office, sells the property or leases the property to Century 21 or Coldwell Banker or whatever, whether the board is interested in knowing or acting upon that type of operation. And we're asking that this conditions be eliminated from them because the zoning resolution covers the change of use that the owner would have to come to the board for an additional variance.
Do you know why there was that restriction on ownership? Like, what's the history?
Pardon me?
Why was there a restriction on ownership? What's the history there, do you know?
The ownership?
Yeah, why did the board impose way back when that restriction?
Okay, I went through the archives.
Mm-hmm.
I went through the board cases. I cannot find out why they put that in.
Mm-hmm.
There's no writing, no nothing that stipulates why that was in there.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to be contrary to the zoning resolution, because it's having you act upon something that really has no contention of being before the board. Because there's no change of use, it's only a change of ownership or operation.
Right. Well, there are other places in the zoning, for instance, physical cultural establishments, when they change ownership, you have to go back and amend the application, right? So there are places, I'm just trying to figure out whether there was something
I
that the
couldn't find
community
out.
was concerned about. Okay.
Yeah, I went through them, I couldn't find anything that says why they did that. Okay? Another condition that we're asking, the board had approved the, excuse me, number of parking spaces from 4 to 6. We're asking that one more space be added in to make 7 spaces, because the parking restriction of 4 to 7 p.m. on that side of Northern Boulevard, I was told was done away with. So people now park all day along Northern and are within walking distance of the Long Island Railroad. So the space in the back of the building can accommodate 7 spaces. So we're asking for that to be done. And the last thing are the signs. There are 2 signs, one on the building and the pole sign. From what I told, the pole sign was there before the first variance was applied for. And I submitted copies of the photographs from those cases that show that those signs have been there. And whether they're grandfathered or not, I'm trying to obtain some sort of approval from the board so that we can go to the building department and obtain the necessary permits, because I cannot find anything that stipulates that the signs are legally there. But they've been there for many, many years.
Well, so that's the question there. So in the 1990 resolution, there was a comment that the signs had to, BSA resolution, the comment that the signs had to comply with C1 zoning. And then in the 99 resolution, though there wasn't a specific comment about the signs, it referred to the conditions of the prior resolutions. So it doesn't sound like the board at any time had approved the sign being not in compliance with C1 zoning. But what's strange is it seems as if it's just because of the orientation of the sign that it doesn't comply with C1 zoning, because if it was on a diagonal, I think, but you'd have to go to the buildings department to verify that the buildings department would measure half of that pole sign as facing 167th Street and the other half as facing the avenue.
One of the sign applications in the previous board cases, they made an equivalent C2 area. I found in one of the papers that was submitted to the board in one of the previous applications. But the other thing you got to remember, that this is a one-story building. When you drive along Northern Boulevard, I don't know who examined it or whatever, but you can easily miss that building. It's really the pole sign that draws the attention that that office building is there. And that's why we were asking for the approval for the...
Right, no, but it's just really, I think what you have to do is go to the Department of Buildings and just see if you rotated the sign so that it's a little bit on diagonal, so that it's facing both the boulevard and the street, then you could count half and half, 50% of it to 167th Street and 50% to
Well, I did that when I
Northern
submitted
Boulevard.
the application.
Right, but now it's fully facing 167th, so that's why it's measured against 167th Street, right? So, because frankly, unless you apply for a variance for the sign, I don't really see where the board's authority is to waive the sign regulations. You have
But
to
the
apply for a
sign really
variance.
doesn't impinge on a residential district.
Right, but what's the board's authority to waive the sign regulations? It's got to be a variance, right? So
Well-
as far as I can tell from the history, unless you can find something else, the board never issued a variance for the sign regulations. It said, in fact,
Well, I did have a case before the board in Manhattan on a public garage, and the board did approve the sign, which was contrary to the sign regulations in the zoning resolution.
it gave it
They
a
did.
variance.
They approved the sign as it would show, as it existed. And I can submit that if the board is
You
interested.
need to make a case for why we would have the authority. At the moment, I don't know why. And it would be easy enough for you to go to the Department of Buildings and find out what they would accept with that same exact dimension, or maybe you modify the dimension slightly on the sign. It's not over by that much, right?
Okay.
Okay.
Also, the signs are illuminated, and C1 doesn't allow illuminated
I didn't hear you,
signs.
pardon me?
The signs are illuminated. I don't really see any indication that...
They're illuminated, yes. In one of the resolutions, the board even stipulated as a condition that the signs be shut off at 10 PM. So the board did recognize that the signs were illuminated at one of the previous hearings.
Right, but it doesn't mention it in the statement of facts anywhere that there are illuminated signs, so we don't know if they're still illuminated or if they were illuminated in the 90s, but not today. So if you could add that. But really, I think you need to go to the DOB first and figure out how to resolve that, because otherwise, I don't see the authority for granting.
Okay.
Okay? So we had some other questions? Do you want to?
I raised the question about the parking. Previously, when you had 6 spaces, one of your spaces was an ADA space, and now you have 7, but you have enough room for the first space to also retain it, an ADA status. It would be good if you would do that to accommodate the
into that.
population.
Okay.
And also, there were just some comments about, for example, supposed to be a post and chain that closes off the parking at night. And if you could provide a photograph showing the chain in place, then we'd know that it's actually functioning, because there's nothing to indicate that it's there.
Okay.
Okay, on both sides. And then also the planting, there's just some planting along that one little parking area on 167th that's missing.
Okay.
So if that could be installed. And anybody else?
Well, I had made the comment yesterday that I felt you had, in my opinion, you had some case regarding the change of ownership as long as it remained in office use and not having to come back to the BSA. But I would sort of be reluctant to do that if you wanted to maintain your non-complying signage, because you don't know who the other user is going to be, and, you know, it seems to be, you didn't give us a really good reason why you have to have that signage. I mean, it's 2 illuminated signs, it's a large pole sign in a residential neighborhood.
But as long as it's office use, why would the change of ownership or operator have anything to do with the use?
Because it's just continuing it along the way. Like, your argument is that it's the same owner for many years, and he's had this signage before, and we just want to continue the signage. But if you change ownership, you know, why do you necessarily need that signage? It could be a small lawyer's office, and they don't have to advertise that much.
Well, let's put it this way. If you were to just make the sign on facing 167th Street 50 square feet to illuminated, so 50 square feet to comply with the C1 zoning, then we'd be done with the subject of the sign, right? And that's a pretty big sign already. I think it just means taking off that bottom panel. So then we'd be done with that subject. And then we could talk certainly about this idea that you limit the use to only office use, because the problem is if you're sort of generally use group 6, then we might have, you know, a McDonald's there. That's not at all what the community had in mind. So if we limited it to professional offices, if that would be okay with your client, then that might be something we could do. That way we know it's at least a kind of a quiet use,
Okay,
right?
okay.
Okay. Okay, are there any other comments about this? Any speakers on this item? Okay, so.
Yes, there's a community
Oh,
board.
sorry, go ahead.
Good morning. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I'm Terry Pumari from Auburndale Improvement Association, one of the two homeowners associations in this area. The Community Board 7, unfortunately it said 4 on the calendar, but it's Community Board 7, had 2 committee hearings, and the committee voted to extend the terms of the variance for another 10 years for a one-story building, specifically that is occupied as a real estate office. Same provisions, no changes. Both civics occurred on this decision. The full community board subsequently approved the variance renewal as is with no changes. I think the vote was 31-4 in favor of leaving as is. A variance provision had been put 15 years ago into the variance. There shall be no change in ownership or operating control without prior application to and approval from the board. We who represent the civics feel that it would be a bad idea to remove that provision. Since the real estate office lies in an area covered by the Rickett-Finley covenants that go back to the early 20th century, 1906, I believe, and is in a section of Northern Boulevard without overlays, there is a wide section where we do variances, and we fought, I don't say fought, but we struggled with the planning and rezoning, and we worked with John Young so that we could keep the variance system, which works well from some very large businesses like gas stations and Taco Bell in that area. So that's one of the reasons why we believe that was put in. It's felt that this provision gives the community some level of control and protection if the site were to be sold in the future and redeveloped. We would get a heads up that would give us the opportunity to work with the new owner to ensure that the site would be used appropriately based on the zoning regulations, R2 in that area, that we have worked so hard in order to maintain for many years. We worked long to protect the residential areas, and we support variances as they allow us, the community, to check on business operating in our community. Time limits protect the business owner and the homeowner, and it seems to work out well. If there are no problems with the business, then we support renewal. If there are problems, then we can negotiate and deal with solving those problems. Auburndale Improvement Association urges the Board of Standards and Appeals to support the Civic Association's positions that this variance be renewed for 10 years for a one-story building that is occupied by a real estate office with no changes in the provisions of the variance. We feel that this best serves our community's interests and does no harm to the business and its owner. This business operates kind of low scale, low key. Over the last few years in our area, real estate agents and brokers have gotten very aggressive. They come on the door, they walk up the block, they knock, they offer you cash, and they really want to pursue this. I think that if in the future he chooses to sell any property, especially his own, there's going to be a buyer right there within a week or two. Friends of mine sold houses within a week. We are a hotbed for real estate activity, so I think his property, whether it has a variance that has a little bit of a clink in it, it's going to not impinge on his business at all. Thank you.
I have a question for you.
Yes, ma'am.
Would you object to it just being an office limitation, so that it might be law offices, an accountant, something like that?
I think so. Because it's been a real estate office for a long, long time. If it were a law office, that would provide perhaps more parking and perhaps more activity. It's kind of a sleepy little business, and it fits right in to that section of Northern Boulevard. Further up into Bayside, there's more activity. There's car dealerships and so on. We don't have it. It's really kind of small town, and we like it that way. Thank you.
Any other speakers on this? Oh, there are actually quite a few.
Good morning, Madam Chair and the Commissioners. My name is Rhea O'Gorman. I represent the other Civic in the area, the Station Road Civic. And as stated before, we support the granting of the extension or renewal of the variance as is. The business is a very sleepy little business. You hardly know it's there. He does not need a 7th parking space to run this business because the lot's never full, except on Sunday when the church across the street uses the lot because the chains aren't across. The chains can't go across. One is buried at this point. But in any case, the more important thing is the restrictive clause. The restrictive clause to a community is heaven sent, because all too often, and I think in this case, when this business sells, and I think the sale is fairly imminent, this will go to something other than a sleepy little realty office. And our objection to continuing it for any type of office is medical offices are all the rage, and they have lots of traffic, and they have ambulettes. It becomes we already have a dialysis center, so it becomes an extreme burden to the community. This property is located at the corner of Northern and 167th. That is the outlet corner for an elementary school that's located on 45th Avenue and 167th Street. You can't have a bottleneck at that corner. It needs to be a sleepy little business. The variance, as it stands now, does not impinge on the owner-operator's ability to run his business and to run it the way he has run it for years. And as far as the disability parking space, there's no parking space that's denominated as handicapped. They're all exactly the same. They're all just a line in between them. So maybe if you're going to grant him that and you want a disability spot, it should be so marked. And definitely the community would like the chains or some sort of barrier on both entrances and entrances or exits, however you're going to denominate them, to the lot. But the restrictive covenant, the only purpose for removing the restrictive covenant is to maximize what he's going to realize through the sale of this business. It has no effect on him running his business the way it is now. It's basically to increase his inheritance and that of his siblings, whoever else is an heir to the property. And we don't believe that the community should bear the burden of someone else's inheritance. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi, I'm Larry Burnett from the Station Road Civic Association. I'm living on 171st Street for about 38 years, and Utopia Realty has been in the neighborhood forever, longer than me. They've been a good neighbor in operating their business with a variance. A variance allows you to operate a business in an area not zoned for it. He's always been granted this variance because he's been operating his business as is stated. Now he wants the variance to go hand in hand with the property rather than his business, and I have a problem with that. If he gets his way, what about the next guy and the next guy? If the variance goes with the property, there'll be no control over what business might open in that location. I don't know if anyone has seen what's going on in Flushing, but you need to have some kind of control over what's going on. If we don't put some kind of a handle on this, we might be looking at Main Street or Co-op City, because that is what's going on in the rest of Flushing. So we're not telling him that he can't operate his business because he has a great business. We just want our neighborhood to stay just that, a neighborhood, and let the next guy get his own variance. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. Is that it? That's it? Okay, thank you. Okay, any other comments, questions here? Okay. Okay, so.
I have the owner here who would like to say a few
That would be
words if
great.
you can.
Yes.
Okay?
Please state your name.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Paul Luciano. I'm third generation Utopia Real Estate. I thank the people for coming in, giving their opinions. I appreciate their opinions. We've been running an operation of real estate business for over 50 years there, and we don't go knocking on doors. I think the guy was trying to explain that we're not one of those type of brokers that do that. We are a low-key broker. The issue of the chains are there. The gal missed them. They are there. The reason why we allow the church to park there on Sundays is to help the community, because if you're ever there on Sunday mornings, you cannot get through 167th Street being a one-way towards Northern Boulevard, because the cars are all double parked, triple parked for the church community. So the Reverend asked us if we'd allow him to use our lot for certain hours. Why not? We complied. I have no intention of selling this business right now. intention of continuing my operation. My operation is ongoing. It's successful. My signs do not illuminate 167th Street on purpose. We didn't want, when my father did that years ago with the other attorney that did that with the board, he didn't want to disturb the residences along 167th Street. So they allowed him to, and it is on diagonal, by the way. It's a slight diagonal. And they are not illuminated after 10 o'clock, and most of the time they're not illuminated at all, because I purposely leave them off.
So they have lights?
They do have electric.
Okay.
We can illuminate them.
Okay, but you don't use...
Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. Most of the time, we do not. I'm just trying to think about the comments that were made.
Excuse me, is the sign on your building illuminated?
Yes,
Well-
but again, that one is on, if you look at the building,
Yeah.
if you're on Northern Boulevard, you're facing the building, there's a sign, maybe about 3 feet by 8 feet or so, I don't know the exact dimensions, on the building, on the rooftop, actually. And it only faces Northern Boulevard.
And that's the only one that you illuminate?
No.
Both of them.
There's a diagonal sign on the corner of 167th Street.
Right,
And Northern
on the
Boulevard.
building itself?
They both illuminate, they're both on timers. I want to say, I think that one illuminates very rare. And I think I have them off now. I have to check, but I think I have them off. And if they go on, it's for a very short period of time during dusk.
So just for clarification, I think we need
They
to
do have electric.
clarify exactly where your signs are and which ones are illuminated, because I think you actually are missing a sign on your sheet from being at the
There's
site.
one sign facing Northern Boulevard.
Correct.
And there's the diagonal pole sign.
Correct, that's it.
On the corner.
And that's it? You don't
That's
have
it.
a second sign on the rooftop there?
No, only one.
Oh, it's called a rooftop sign because of the mounting height. It's actually
It's
mounted
on the
on the
lower,
roof.
No, because I
It's mounted
passed
like
by
this.
there about a couple weeks ago.
On the left-hand side.
I thought you had an additional sign,
3 signs?
but maybe I just did
No.
not see it correctly. I apologize.
No, I don't have 3, I have 2.
Okay.
The pole sign faces Northern Boulevard, either way. east or
Yeah,
west.
we didn't want to disturb.
Not going on a residential district at all.
Right, and I want to make that clear, and that's to protect the homeowners along 167th Street. See, remember, there was no church there, and that's the other issue where we needed the parking.
Where's the church located?
Right across the street.
Across the street on 167 or?
Correct, 167. Remember when there was the explosion in Flushing? That knocked all my windows out, and we paid for them because the insurance wouldn't. And that happened about, I don't know, 15 years ago or so, and they built the church and a school. And they do flea markets there, and they do all kinds of things there. So there's no parking. That's why we asked for the additional parking. And it's not just, Sunday mornings, we do allow, the guy was right, we do allow the church to park there. But we thought we were doing something good for the community. During the week, the church is still packed, because they do have flea markets, they do have the schools. So that's why we needed the extra spot. And I was right. Because of the parking from 4 to 7 that's now allowed again, a lot of people park along 167th Street and Northern Boulevard, and we don't have a place to park for our agents or for customers. So that's what, and we've never had, I don't believe we've ever had a handicap, because I believe they said, as long as you have less than like 10 employees or something like that, and less than like certain spots, you don't need it. And that's why we did that.
But it is on your plans.
Okay,
It's on your previously approved plans.
okay.
So, so what happens at the end of the church parking day? Who puts the chain back up? How does that work?
That day, I don't think they put it back up because they're constantly going in and out. And we allowed them to do it.
No, but at the end of the day, so that
We could lock it.
parking there at night and
We could lock it.
Yeah, so if you could include that at the end of the use of the parking by the church, that somebody either from your office or the church
Okay.
make sure that the chain is up.
There's a padlock on it, and there are 2 poles, and it does extend. It could definitely be used.
Okay. So,
What are you,
go ahead.
what are your hours of operation?
Independent agents, real estate brokers are independent agents. Let me tell you about our secretary. She comes in at 9, and she leaves at 3.
Are you open 7 days a week?
We're open 7 days a week, but the reality is, we're not. Let me explain that. I don't work 7 days a week. I work usually 5 days a week, 6 days a week, but we don't have to be in the office to be working. We're in the field, we're doing inspections, we're doing showings, we're doing open houses, so you don't need to be in the office. Agents come and go. We don't direct their schedules. So they all have keys, they all have the codes to the office, and they come and go. But actual customers coming in, they don't, between 9:30, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, the latest, that's it. We're usually out of there.
Any other questions? So I guess my only other question, since you're not intending to sell the business, and obviously this would be a funny time in our economy to get out of the real estate business, you know, it's like booming, right? So then why would it matter whether the variance was granted, restricting your use? Right.
Okay, that's a fair question. Let me tell you what I spoke to one of the other gals about. I didn't know this clause was in there until Mr. Duarte told me about it. I don't think my father knew it was there either, but I don't know, he's passed on. But let me say this. To me, it's just a question which gnaws at me in the back of my head. If the variance is affixed to the building, to the property, like I've been told, no matter who owns the property, I'm like, why is there so much of a concern? And no one has really been able to explain to me what the real issue is. Because even if I sold the building today, that new owner would have to abide by the same variance that's on the building and property today. So I really don't understand why they have to feel, they use the word control. There's something wrong with that with me, that they want to control what I do. You guys control me. The city controls me. The laws control me. I didn't want personal people that don't even live in that area. I don't think that Rhea lives on 167th Street. But she seems to know where I live. And she made claims that because I have a home in Sag Harbor, that I'm not a community person. I was raised in the projects near Bland, near Shea Stadium. I was shining shoes in Flushing when I was 8 years old. I was raised in this office. I was raised playing stickball in PS 107. I know how important the community is, and that's why I allow the church to use my parking lot, because I didn't want to have that bottleneck near 167th Street near my office. So, I don't know why the concern is, especially if the variance stays with the property. I think it's a non-issue. So I just don't know why they want to add it. Well, and let me say something else. We had a travel agent in that building. We had mortgage practice in that building. We had insurance practice in my building because we carried all those registrations and licenses ancillary to real estate. Now, because I do a lot of work with bank-owned properties, I don't do mortgages anymore because I didn't want to have any false perception about collusion. So we don't do mortgages. I haven't done mortgages in probably 15 years. So we're strictly doing real estate. My pop, when he passed away, I didn't take on his insurance business. We got rid of that, we passed it on to some insurance broker. So we do just real estate, but that's what we do. But there was never any issues, they never came forth between 79 and when my father passed away. Well, why do you have an insurance sign? Why do you have a mortgage broker sign? That never came up. Nothing ever came up. It only came up now because they want to feel like that little control. I'm not sure what it is, you know?
Okay, I understand. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
One of the statements made was that they feel that if it changed to a law office, there would be more activity. To me, that's sort of impinging on free enterprise. It's still an office use. Why do they want to control this law office that may want to go in there? That's going to prevent a sale or prevent a lease or whatever, but still meets the variance that's given by the Board of Standards and Appeals and allowed under the zoning resolution. Somehow they want to restrict what can go there and have a bigger say than what the owner has on his own property.
Right. Okay. Any comments?
Well, I don't know how the other commissioners feel, but I would feel a lot more comfortable agreeing with that as long as the signage was in compliance.
Office use.
No, signage is in compliance, right?
That if it's transferred, it's not going to go to some other user that says, oh, well, I can use this signage, and instead of some very mild sign, they turn out to be bright pink or, illuminated bright pink. If you weren't in compliance with
The owner
the C1 signage, I would feel a lot more comfortable.
Okay, so how about we just say, first of all, that you could do this probably quickly. Do a quick calculation again on the sign. It's over by whatever that is, 10
Okay.
square feet or something, hardly anything, right? So, and remove that section. You can replace it with another section, or just remove the section that's over and show a replacement with a section that still is in compliance. And then we'll get the sign story out of the way, okay?
That corner sign is very valuable to us. And the bottom is very valuable. Would it be okay with you guys if I removed the portion of the sign that's on the rooftop? I'll remove it.
Not that section.
So here's the thing, it's kind of annoying, but the signage regulations are really strange, and they apply to each frontage of the building. So you have 50 square feet of a illuminated sign allowed on Northern Boulevard, and 50 square feet allowed on 167th. And you're not allowed to agglomerate those and combine it to be 100 on one place. So the problem is, even if you were to remove that sign, unless you fully turned your pole sign on the diagonal, which would mean probably, guys coming and digging out the little footing that's there and rotating your pole, and you'd need the Department of Buildings to sort of sign off on that interpretation.
But the neighbors on 167th probably wouldn't like that, because if the sign is illuminated, even if it closes at 10, it would be
No, it's on the diagonal towards Northern Boulevard.
It is now.
It's actually, well, the way that it's shown and from the photographs, it looks like it's really facing more of 167.
Oh, no, not at all.
Well, maybe the problem is actually
The angle.
that the depiction on the drawing is incorrect, but the angle, when we see it from the photographs, it really looks like its orientation is 167.
Okay, I'm really sure that because if you go east or west on Northern, you can see that corner sign. When you come up 167th, you can't see it until you're right on top of it. It's facing the gas station.
So maybe
We'll
you
submit-
need
But if I
some
can remove that other sign,
clarification.
I'll be happy to do it.
Okay, so what we really need is, it needs to comply with the Department of Buildings interpretation on signs, because this isn't something that we can waive, okay? So you need to work that out with DOB. Okay, so if you could clear up the story with the sign, either remove something to correct it, or reorient it, or whatever's necessary that Department of Buildings agrees to, so you're going to have to go to the Department of Buildings and get them to agree on your sign installation, and then you can come back and we can talk about the rest. And then, were there some, the issue of the planting, so we'd like to see the shrubs replaced in that spot. A photograph of the chain in place, and something in your statement of facts that indicates that the chain will be installed at night, and in terms of church services, you'll work out something with the church to make sure the chain is always up at night, okay?
Okay, as far as the planting goes, the planting is in conformance. There were never any plants against the building.
No, not against the building. It's along 167th. There's one pathetic little shrub, and then something next to the parking on 167th.
Oh, I know what you mean. Okay, I know what you mean. Near the chain, actually.
Yeah, kind of neighborhood beautiful type story. Okay. Photos speak miles. Anything else? Did I leave anything else? Okay, so can we do that? So you're going to need some time to go to DOB with the sign. So I'd say that's going to take you at least 6 weeks, probably, right? So how about, can you come back, make a submission on March 3rd?
That's what I have open for.
Okay. And, actually, make a submission on March 10th, because we don't have a hearing until the 24th of March.
So submit by March 3rd?
Submit by March 10th
Oh, March
for a
10th.
hearing on March 24th.
Okay,
Okay, great. Thank you very much, sir, for
Thank you
coming.
very much.
Thank you, everyone, for coming.
okay, thank you.
Okay.
Appeals calendar, continued item number 4. 245 12A, 515 East 5th Street, Manhattan.
Morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners, Marvin Mitzner, the applicant.
Hi.
Just to update the board on the status of this matter, since the last hearing, the 6th floor and 7th floor units have been vacated and are currently unoccupied. We've also met with DOB. We met with them on December 3rd, both with the Borough Commissioner, and we had a conference call with Council's office, at which point it was determined that the best approach that DOB felt we could take was to file for a full demolition of the 6th floor and 7th floor, and a partial demolition permit for just the 7th floor. We need to show reconstruction of the 6th floor, but that council felt we could do pursuant to a site safety or a construction safety plan. And it was suggested that we file a ZRD1 with the borough for those details so that it could be approved as part of that rather than a separate permit for reconstruction of the 6th floor. We're now in the process of doing that. Unfortunately, as you probably heard the last hearing, the architect's office moved, and vacation schedules between the architect, contractor, owner, and myself, I just came back on Monday, has dampened our ability to get the ZRD1 filed as quickly as we'd like. The units are vacant, as I said, so it's in our interest to move this as quickly as possible, and that's the owner's intent.
Okay, so what's the status of the drawings and the ZRD1 right now?
Right now, we have a draft of the ZRD1, which has to be modified based upon the drawings. The contractor has a list of items. There's a meeting that will be taking place between the professionals, I think tomorrow, to finalize those. So we should have something available to file probably by the end of next week.
Okay, something available to file the Department of Building?
Yes,
I mean,
mhm.
drawings and ZRD1
Right.
and the contractor's list of the scope of the work, is that what
That's
you mean?
correct, yes.
Okay. Okay, so simultaneous with submitting it to the Department of Buildings, we'd like you to submit it to us as well?
That's fine.
Okay, so that would be then, you said when, the end of next week?
End of next week.
So that would be the 23rd of January? So we're expecting on the 23rd of January that submission. Please don't be late, because it's been a long time since
It has been a long time. Unfortunately, it's out of my hands, but I believe that...
Because that was quite a vacation you took.
Not myself. As it turned out, all the professionals took vacation at different times, covering the entire holiday period.
So they shut down that whole architecture office for vacation?
2 weeks.
That's cool. Okay. Okay, all right. Any other comments?
Just, do you have any idea how long it will take DOB to issue you your demo permits?
Have no idea. As you may know, we've already filed a demo permit as originally filed, for demolition of the penthouse and restoration of 6th floor. That's been filed already. Hasn't been reviewed as far as I know.
But it would be reviewed in conjunction with the ZRD1 and your...
That's correct.
Okay, so
We
you
now have
don't
to-
have an idea of how long that process will take at DOB and when we could see some actual movement in terms of construction?
I don't know. As I said, I met with the Borough Commissioner of Manhattan, so he's aware of the time frame here, and I'm sure he'll do what he can to expedite that process.
And your conversation with counsel's office, that was agreeing on the submission method? Is
That's
that-
correct.
Okay.
That's right.
Was that Felicia Miller? Is that?
Alicia Miller and Mark Davis.
Okay. Any other comment? Any speakers on this item?
Yes.
Yes.
Good morning, Dan Bernstein from the law firm of Arnold & Porter on behalf of the Tenants Association. We'd just like the board to know that we remain concerned about this whole process, which has been going on for essentially 9 years now, with practically no movement. The board asks for a number of different things months ago, and we haven't seen any of them from the owner or from council. So just want to reiterate that we remain very concerned. There's no right to a waiver here. There's no right to a variance here. The board has discretion to ensure that substantial justice is done. We don't believe that under these circumstances, a waiver or variance is warranted, given the conduct of the owner over the last 9 years. We've been dealing with this for 9 years, and nothing has happened. I can't stress that enough. As the Tenants Association is directly affected by all this, we'd like an opportunity to make a submission. We'd like 2 weeks for our submission, and we would also ask the board to direct counsel to send us copies of his submissions, which despite our numerous requests, he's failed to do so. We don't want to have to keep burdening the Department of Buildings and the BSA every time we have to go fishing for a submission, just so we could know what we need to respond to, and just so we know what's going to happen to the building where our clients live.
You want a submission with respect to what? To their submission?
Yeah,
They made
we'd like an
on the
opportunity to
23rd?
respond to their submission, and we would also like the board to ask council to send us their submission directly. We've asked them ourselves multiple times, but unfortunately have not been receiving copies of any of the submissions.
Well, just so you know, there haven't been any submissions, so you did not receive anything.
I know that in the last 2 months, but this has been
Right.
going on for not 2 months, but years and years and years.
But do you happen to know whether the apartments are vacant upstairs as is? Do you have proof, or have you seen that they're vacant upstairs?
I don't know whether they are all vacant.
Okay, so
We'd like some
that's a
proof.
step.
Yeah.
That was one of the complaints from the tenant association.
Yes.
So those units are vacant, according to what we're told. So that's a step, right?
Okay.
That's progress. Okay.
Better than nothing, thank you.
Okay. Any other speakers on this item? Okay. Okay, so.
Let me just object to the characterization of council that for the Tenants Association, that this has been ongoing for 9 years. What's been ongoing is the fact that our client received a permit from DOB and constructed the enlargement and the improvements. That construction work ended some time ago. It was only through the efforts of the Tenants Association at this board that overturned certain determinations that put us in this position. And I think that has to be clarified. We come to this board as an innocent party in terms of having constructed something pursuant to a permit which at the time was validated by DOB and supported by DOB through the process at this board. And DOB always supported the determinations they made and the permits they gave us to allow that construction to continue. And I frankly don't understand the opposition of the Tenants Association other than just to give the owner a hard time. There's no impact to them at this point. Construction is done and completed, the apartments are vacant. I don't see the point.
Understood. Okay. So any other comments here? So, yes, so we would like that submission on the 23rd of January. And then we'd like follow-up on what the status is with the DOB. I mean, have you been assigned any, I'm wondering if there's something we could do to have them assign like one of those special, yeah, we can, what do they call it? There's a sort of a special sort of expediter type person at the DOB.
I don't, the name of
One of those.
Project advocate, I
But it's not at that.
There we go.
It's not at that point yet, because the process, as I understand it, is once we file the ZRD1 with the plans and supporting documentation, it will go to the Manhattan Borough Commissioner, who will issue the termination. And the termination will either say, yes, we'll agree to this, or contain some modifications in terms of what they'd like to see additionally, or how they want to work the process. It's only at that point that I think the plans or the final plans will be reviewed by DOB in a permit issue.
Okay, so in terms of the plans examination that's going to occur after the commissioner
Makes the
agrees on the
determination.
ZRD1? Okay.
Right.
Okay, so we will actually call DOB and see if we can expedite this.
That's fine.
On our side, okay.
You're welcome then.
Okay, so just to keep in touch, in other words, and to make sure that you're submitting as rapidly as possible, because we don't want to go through another one of these 2-month waits. So could you submit on the 23rd, and your project manager, I believe it's Tony Matias, will get in touch with you weekly about other updates okay? And for you to come back on the 24th of February for us to catch up. Okay, what? Oh, and opposition wants to submit, so, well, the only submission that we think we're going to have is on the 23rd of February, if there's anything else. So opposition can submit on, what is that, the 10th of February?
The 24th does not work for me. Can we do that March 3rd?
March 3rd, sure.
Okay, thank you.
And then you can obviously respond to opposition, so if they submit on the 10th of February, you can submit your response on the 24th of February.
That's fine.
Okay.
I don't know what the opposition is. We are filing a ZRD application
I
with
don't
DOB. I really, Madam Chair, I just don't understand what's happening, what's taking place here. We're filing a ZRD1 application to try to accomplish something. I don't understand what the opposition could possibly say to that. And I don't think they're entitled to.
Well, they're entitled to because this is a free and open forum, so they're entitled to review drawings and make their comments about safety and so on. They know things about the building. I'm not sure what they'll be able to find on the drawings either. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 5, 10914A, 44 Marjorie Street, Queens.
Good morning again, Jessica Rubenstein on behalf of Eric Platnick, PC.
So I think on this one, we just got a submission that was very helpful about where the trucks are going to be parking from the owner who indicated they'll be parking inside the building. So I don't know if there are any comments. We've talked about everything else. Any
And
other
they
comments?
also revised the statement of facts and findings.
Correct.
Okay. And that was great, the 2 letters from the owner and architect about the use of the building as a use group 16A. So are there any speakers on this item? Okay, so I think we can close this. And this was something we were going to close and vote? Yes. Yeah. Is that okay? So, so for a motion to close?
Chair Perlmutter?
Aye.
Vice Chair Hinkson?
Aye.
Commissioner Montanez?
Aye.
Commissioner Otley Brown?
Aye. Okay, and then for a motion to approve, but conditioned on Department of Buildings agreement that this is a use group 6A, of course, and also on the fire department conditions, and, sorry?
16.
16A, sorry. And also on the fire department conditions, and also on the fact that the truck parking will occur on the interior of the building. Okay, so for a motion to grant?
Chair Perlmutter?
Aye.
Vice Chair Hinkson?
Aye.
Commissioner Montanez?
Aye.
Commissioner Otley Brown?
Aye. Thank you.
New cases, item number 6, 11014A through 11214A, 115, 109, 105 Roswell Avenue, Staten Island.
I believe with this, we still needed fire department?
Fire Department.
Yeah. Is the fire department here?
Yes.
Have you had a chance to look at this?
Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Anthony Santoro for the Fire Department. We are still reviewing this case. We're close to an approval. There is one question that I'm going to pose to the applicant in writing. The street width is marked 50 feet, but it seems to be from property line to property line, not curb to curb. We were a little late in seeing that, so we held back our letters. We just want to confirm that curb to curb width is 34 feet or in compliance with the current fire code. We will resolve that. There are no other issues other than clarification of the street width. So we should be able to close this out and make comments, most likely a positive comment within the week.
Okay, great, thank you. And for the applicant, if the curb to curb width is not 34 feet, then you should make that correction, because otherwise there's a problem with the fire department. Okay. Okay. Any other comments on this? Are there any speakers on this item? Okay, so just that being the only open issue, we can close this. And so for a motion to close?
Chair Perlmutter?
Aye.
Vice Chair Hinkson?
Aye.
Commissioner Montanez?
Aye.
Commissioner Otley Brown?
Aye. So assuming that we get fire department sign off, we can decide on the 27th, I think, is that okay? Yeah?
Your choice.
Okay.
Okay, thank
January
you.
27th. Thank you.
Zoning calendar, decision items. Item number 7, 7811BZ and 33 to 3712A, 78-70 Winchester Boulevard, Queens.
Okay, with this one, we're still needing DEP and fire department sign off, so we have to defer decision. I'm not sure for how long, though, for 6 weeks? Is that good? So then decision on the 24th? Does that sound right? February?
February 24th. Okay. Item number 8, 26613BZ, 515 East Fifth Street, Manhattan.
This is a companion case to the one we discussed already with Mr. Mitzner, so I don't think we have to go through this again. The submission schedule is as discussed on case number 245-12A.
Item number 9, 16814BZ, 419 Lafayette Street, Manhattan.
Good morning, Julia Young on behalf of the applicant.
For a motion to grant?
Chair Perlmutter?
Aye.
Vice Chair Hinkson?
Aye.
Commissioner Montanez?
Aye.
Commissioner Otley Brown?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 10, 18414BZ, 1-37 Street, 3712th Street, Brooklyn.
Jordan Most from the Office of Sheldon LaBelle, PC.
Aye. So for a motion to grant, but on condition that the 1977 city planning restrictive deck be removed.
Of course.
Okay, so for a motion to grant?
Chair Perlmutter?
Aye.
Vice Chair Hinkson?
Aye.
Commissioner Montanez?
Aye.
Commissioner Otley Brown?
Aye.
Thank you.
Item number 11, 18514BZ, 14 Wall Street, Manhattan.
Jordan Most from the Office of Sheldon LaBelle.
All right, so this one I believe we need to defer because we need the certificate of no effect from LPC.
Right. That's been filed for. We should have it shortly.
Great, thank you.
What date?
Oh, you should have it shortly, 2 weeks?
I believe so, but maybe,
Maybe,
I guess the
okay.
3rd would be, is that a,
Okay, so for
Safe date.
submission maybe on the 3rd, is that
no,
what you're saying?
if
On the
we could do the hearing-
27th?
Sure.
Okay, submission on the 27th of January for a hearing, for a decision on the 3rd of February.
Item number 12.
Thank you.
20114BZ, 3524 3rd Avenue, Bronx.
Good morning, Commissioners. Frank Angelino on behalf of the application.
For a motion to grant?
Chair Perlmutter?
Aye.
Vice Chair Hinkson?
Aye.
Commissioner Montanez?
Aye.
Commissioner Otley Brown?
Aye.
Thank you.
Continued hearing items. Item number 13, 11714BZ, 101 West 91st Street, 121 West 91st, and 114 to 124 West 92nd Street, Manhattan. Is Joshua here too?
Good morning, Elise Wagner on behalf of the applicant, the Trinity School. And I'm joined today by a number of people from Trinity, the head of school, the chair of the board. This application is very important to Trinity, and that's why they're all here. While we're setting up, I just want to say that we listened very carefully to the board's comments yesterday, and what we're going to do today is just briefly respond to those questions. Marta Sanders from Rogers Partners will respond to those comments. What she's going to do is start by just showing our current proposal, which actually lowered the ventilation shaft further to provide a 20-foot distance and really maximize the light and air to the loggia. She's also going to explain why any further changes would significantly impact the program of the school. Following that, she'll talk briefly about the terrace that is created and how that will be planned, and also talk about the school's efforts regarding garbage and maintaining a clean area in the garbage area. So as soon as the technology is ready, Marta will get started. I'm sorry? Okay, go ahead.
You need to. That's somebody else. That guy's got
Hello, thank you. Marta Sanders, Rogers Partners Architects. Happy to be back here to show you the latest adjustments to our proposal and also show you some alternatives that we have explored since our last hearing in December. So we will start with the focus on the mechanical well and stair bulkheads. This is clearly an area of the project that has received a lot of attention because of the relationship with the neighboring residents of the Trinity House. This is a slide you've seen before showing the current conditions, identifying where there are existing louvers in the western face of the Hawley Building Trinity House. Those are serving existing mechanical rooms down in the cellar of the Hawley Building. When our engineer was here last time, he explained roughly the large volumes of air that is required to be maintained to continue serving Hawley. So again, a plan that you've seen before. Go, sorry, a little more focus. The plan showing the existing conditions and now the section of the existing conditions with the west over here with the existing two-story garage and the school on the lower levels of the Hawley Building and the loggia up at this level on the fourth floor over with the existing opening of 5'3" facing west that will be maintained in the proposal. So going forward to our current proposal, which has been adjusted since December in response to feedback that we've gotten. So the adjustments basically included lowering the grill over the vent shaft, which is here in the west. The shaft starts 10 feet off of the western face of that loggia and continues on to 20 feet beyond. So this entire area here now is dropped to the level of the existing balusters at the west face of the loggia. I mean, all the proposals we've had for a long time now, the netting that encloses the turf is 30 feet away from that. We have also minimized the size of the bulkheads even further. They are dropped so that they are about the highest point, which is only at the access points of the doors, is 8'7" above the turf level. There is no additional square footage in there for storage of athletic equipment or anything else. And we've sloped down those bulkheads so that they are at their minimum following the slope of the stairs to the north and to the south. And then they continue to slope down so they are at this roof level by the time they are adjacent to the loggia. So in this, we've also explored the option of providing a stair and a ramp to this newly created 850 square foot terrace. It is technically feasible, and we are going to appeal to the Department of Buildings for access for the tenants because it is an adjustment to an existing condition to provide that access. And then a section looking at the currently proposed conditions. So at our last hearing, this mechanical well was up higher. What we've been able to do is by further modifications to the ductwork down below, which I'll show you in a little bit more detail momentarily, we've been able to basically level that out. The roof that's directly adjacent to the turf is about 8 inches below that baluster, and then the grill itself is 8 inches above that roof level, so it is in fact level with the baluster. There is a 3'2" high projection up when you meet the turf level, but that again is 20 feet off of the face of the Hawley Building. So zooming in a little bit more detail, and I know you have hard copies of this. This is a little hard to read the text, but But what we're showing, this is the section with the line between the Hawley building, Trinity House here, and then the new construction over here. Again, this vent shaft, which is feeding the existing mechanical room down in Hawley, shifts over at the first floor, continues up. That is 10 feet off. It starts 10 feet off of the Hawley building, continues 20 feet off. And so what we've been able to do is, by rerouting ductwork, pull this all down so that it's level with that terrace, with actually a slight depression here, so that we're allowed to provide reasonable terminations to the roofing system with that curb. And then again, the grill is practically flush there, so you can walk on it. We've maintained the 5'3" vertical opening that exists today, so that the light and air is maintained to the loggia. And then we have a couple more sections just showing different slices along this zone where the two buildings meet. This is where the duct actually, the return air duct actually comes up through here, explaining why this can't be even lower. We're basically crossing under the beam that's supporting the eastern edge of the turf. We need a minimal dimension here to provide that duct, which is serving the new addition on the eastern side. And then cutting further to the north, where we are now beyond the vent shaft and looking at just the larger terrace that is created at that level. And again, 20 foot wide, maintaining the full light and air that exists in the loggia currently.
And it's showing this planters. When you clear the vent, you have planters in that.
We have the option for including planters, and that's something that we're intending to talk to the tenants about if they prefer not to have planters and just have full terraced area where they could put movable planters. There's flexibility in the design moving forward. And we can look at, we'll show you in our rendering shortly that we've thought about if we had planters here, we can grow up that wall. We've currently faced it with brick, thinking that would be a nice material, but we're, again, open to working with the tenants to make it as visually attractive as possible and usable. And then again, this is now a plan view at the residential level, which is above the turf, a full story, showing that the light and air is maintained to those windows through the adjustments in the heights, as well as the minimization of the bulkheads. And now on the fourth floor level, which is the loggia level, showing this newly created 850 square foot terrace with the vent shaft flush to that, again, allowing the light and air to continue into the existing loggia. And then now working our way down through the building, this is demonstrating that we're able to achieve full school program with this design. So we've shifted the vent shaft over. This is feeding above and taking air down to below. We've rerouted the ducts over the science room ceilings to achieve that, and we've been able to maintain reasonable corridor heights. They're 8'3" in this scenario, which is really, we think, the minimal that is appropriate for a school and for a primary circulation area like this. And we've also been able to maintain 9'6" in the science labs, which again is minimally achievable. The U.S. School Construction Authority actually recommends 10 foot for both of those spaces, but we're managing with this. And then on the second floor, again demonstrating that we're able to achieve full program. We have the upper school study center as well as the choral room here, that we've maintained the circulation and connections between the buildings, which is critical to this project. And I'd like to emphasize the importance of these two spaces. The choral room currently in this formation serves 74 students, which is barely meeting the demand actually of that program, and inherent to one of the key components of this project, which is to maximize the performing arts program for the school. Also, the upper school study center is a key academic space for the upper schoolers. High schoolers have free periods between classes. During those periods, they're expected to work together, get their homework done, study. Because the existing library is quite small, this is a key space for that. It's very important that it's open and continuous, and that the upper school administrators have oversight of it with sight lines to both the northern and the southern parts of that.
And then looking down, we're now at the first floor level where we have, this is the level on which we transferred the ducts over from the Hawley building over western of that property line to take them up through the new vent shaft location. And then at the cellar level, showing the existing mechanical room in the Hawley building with its existing equipment and the new one for the eastern part of the new construction. This is now a view, you've seen this before, slightly adjusted based on our current proposal, looking west from the fourth floor loggia. What you're seeing is the height of the existing baluster here on the west, which is about 4'6" above the surface level inside of the loggia. The width of that opening remains the same, as does the height, which you don't see here. It goes up to 5'3" above that, so that opening remains unchanged. We have a 20-foot distance here until you get to this brick wall, which is the edge of the turf, and that rises up 3'2". And again, how we finish that wall, how we plant that terrace and surface it is really open for discussions with the tenants.
Just a question on the loggia where the balconies are. So you're going to be removing the enclosure. So how will you be treating the new, basically balustrade wall or parapet wall? How will you do that?
We're basically infilling between the two columns with this new wall, which we're showing it here as concrete, since that's what the columns are. Again, we can consider other materials if it's preferable to treat this as a brick face to bring different materiality into the loggia. We certainly could do that.
So you're studying that with the tenants or of Trinity? How are you making that decision?
We've had many meetings with the tenants groups, and I think if this is an accepted proposal, we'll sit down again with them and look through those options. Okay, so in response to our last hearing, we've looked at an alternative to this, which, if we understand the request correctly, what we've looked at is basically continuing the floor levels of the Hawley building into the new construction for a certain distance so that we were able to drop this terrace, which is again the same footprint area, but just dropping it down to the level of the existing fourth floor loggia. So one of the things that we've talked about throughout our submissions is the need for greater floor-to-floor heights in the new construction than are currently in Hawley. Hawley it has a relatively small floor plate, was built in another era when the air exchanges within buildings were different. It is a tighter building than one would ever design today, especially for an institutional project or a school. So with these floor-to-floor heights at about 12 feet, we're not able to achieve appropriate ceiling heights in the new construction that meet planning standards and code requirements and allow for the ductwork and the structural system that's necessary for a building with a large floor plate. So even if so what we have in this study is that we've extended it for the first 1, 2, 3 column bays and created that, basically broadened that lower ceiling height here, and then the ramp that is built over here in the current proposal as an additive feature is actually now pulled back over to the west. So one of the things we'll note that by pulling these lower floor plates in, we have these extremely tight ceiling heights in the public corridor areas. 7'6" is the absolute minimum for code-required egress. It is well below typical planning standards for schools, which have a 10-foot high corridor in public areas.
Sorry, but with that one, that's just, the 7'6" is set because the planter, the loggia level is that. So if you were to raise it up?
No, it's the depth of the structure.
It's the depth of the structure, which isn't that set based on where you want it to land at the loggia height?
Right, this is in response to achieving that level at the loggia.
So that could come up, whatever it is, another 6 inches or something like that, right?
Right, or,
okay.
Or where we have it in our current proposal, which is up a few feet. So it's that depth of structure that is tightening that up. But it also, the bigger issue associated with this is actually the routing of the ductwork and how that starts to impact program use on these floors. Mm-hmm. So if we look, I'll take the next section, this is cutting through the actual vent shaft, which you've seen many times. We have the requirement still to get the ducts under that beam, because this corner of the turf remains as it is with it at its current level, 20 feet off. So to get the duct under, you basically, in this scenario, the vent shaft remains where it is in our proposed, so it's higher, it's that 3'2" higher than that terrace level. And again, as we've shown you in different illustrations, the only way to drop that down to this loggia level is to drop the whole thing and therefore impact floor area. We end up with a ceiling that is too low to occupy under the science lab. So we end up losing some square footage in that room, which is highly problematic for the school. So in this scenario where we drop the structure for those first 3 structural bays, we end up with science labs at different levels. We have one bio lab at the foot of the ramp, the other at the head of the ramp, building up from there, but the structure has to continue from north to south to allow that. Having the science labs at different levels is problematic because now we can't move from one room into the other. We have the 2 bio labs and the bio prep lab. According to general planning standards, including the School Construction Authority and other sources, moving materials directly from room to room is critical to the functionality of those spaces and also for safety. You're not really wanting to take carts of wet and, problematic materials into the corridors, and these corridors are, again, because it's a tight building, relatively narrow, so there's a lot of traffic. So disconnecting those rooms from each other is problematic functionally, from a safety perspective, and also really undermines one of the core goals of this project, to create a unified STEM center.
So the issue is that, for instance, these are physics labs where you're...
These are
chemistry,
bio.
These are bio labs, so like
wet stuff.
hearts of frogs and things like that traveling down the corridor.
Growing things, yes, exactly. So that's a problem for the school, and then perhaps even larger is on the second floor, where we have to, because the beams are now so low with this tighter floor to floor, we need to bring all the air that's serving this eastern half of the building from this vent shaft over to that area. These ducts, really can only be flattened to a certain extent, and there are supply and return ducts running parallel to each other. When they're dropped, we've lost now 2.5 feet from that floor to floor, which basically makes it so that you can't run the ducts under the beams and occupy the space below. We end up with about 4 foot 2 inches clear under the duct itself. So clearly that's not occupiable and creates this dead zone, if you will, running laterally through the building, which diminishes important program space and creates serious disconnections between related program components. So we'll show you that now in plan. Okay, so now working from the top down, you'll see that this looks very much like the proposal that in our base proposal, except for this is lower, but again, the vent shaft remains where it is because of the technical need to transfer those ducts. On the third floor, the science lab floor, we have this area with the corridor dropped down to 7.6 from 8.3. That's really tight and problematic. And then with the science labs, one located at the foot of the ramp, one at the higher level at the head of the ramp, does not allow us to move from one to the other. So now this science lab, to go to the other as well as to its own prep lab, has to travel out through the corridor. This corridor, which is about 8 feet wide and serving 12 classrooms on that northern side.
But the critical different issue is that in section, you're not achieving a planar terrace level. It becomes step 10 feet, and then there's a step up. So you don't get down to the loggia level and then across 20
Correct.
feet.
The vent shaft stays where it is at the level where it's going to, between the turf level and the loggia floor level. It's at the loggia baluster level, essentially.
The task by doing.
Correct, correct. And then with this also, you'll see that this area of corridor, which was in this public area was 8.3, and even in this northern was up to 10 feet, is now dropped down to 7.9. Again, barely above code minimum for egress, absolutely not appropriate for a school. And then we lose the chorus room. The chorus room goes from 1,240 square feet to 917. That takes it from 74 occupants to about 55, which does not at all meet the demand for the school. By creating, this is that shaft where the ducts are supply and return are crossing over to the west until they get under this beam, this third column line, when they can pop up and cross north and then go over the ceiling of these program spaces. We lose all that floor area and basically creates a big dead zone. Reduces that chorus space, cuts it off from the northern corridor where you have all the other ensemble rooms and music offices, and that really impedes the transportation of instruments, the movement of students, the connectivity of that department. The study center, again, is now broken into two. That's a critical space for the upper school academics. It's now broken into two small pieces. It's reduced by about 40%. In the proposed form, it can hold almost a full class of the upper school, which allows for informal gatherings, a range of activities that are vital to high school life. But now it's broken into two small pieces. One would have to come back and around to get from one to the other, and both are too small to really accommodate the type of activities of collaborative learning and working that are envisioned. And it also cuts off the upper school academic office from this piece of the study center, which creates problematic issues with oversight of the students and the interaction of the faculty and students that is very important to a high school. Okay, with that, we'll go along. Any questions on the new proposal?
Any other questions about that? No.
Okay. So the garbage containers, these are some images of the current conditions. So as you know, the garbage containers live out the north face of the existing building, but within the property line of the building, there's this recess that's at the first floor level. The existing kitchen is directly beyond this wall, and then a little further is the existing cafeteria. Those are existing to remain. We're not building a new kitchen, and if we were, we would absolutely be incorporating a new garbage room, but we're basically maintaining an existing condition and improving it, and we'll show you the improvements to this situation. So again, the current conditions with the steel bins, which have plexiglass liners that are then behind sort of a screened perforated fencing and completely locked. So now this is an elevation of the proposed. You'll see that what we're planning is a ground level improvement for the entire length of the building, working around the continued access to the kitchen, the continued access to the garage, the new egress at the east and the west ends of the building. And so what we are proposing is a continuous brick curb that meets the sidewalk and deals with this. There's a pretty significant slope change as you move the full length of the building. And then above that curb, full-height painted steel grills that are uniform, that screen the garbage, that also keep people from dumping things within them. So now this is zooming in on the eastern side. Again, the garbage bins for the kitchen will remain roughly where they are now, which is about 150 feet west of the existing Trinity House residential entries. They live in this area here. We have that continuous brick curb, and then above that, full height. So one of the benefits that we see of this is the curb will minimize any leaking or not allow any leaking out if the bins do leak, the stainless steel bins, which will still be in there to create the vermin-proof containers for the garbage bags. And then the full-height painted steel fencing will provide a continuous screen of that. It'll allow a little air to pass through because this is not ventilated space, but it'll be naturally ventilated through that. It'll be visually screened. And because if you recall in those pictures, they come up about halfway. These will go all the way up, so it'll prevent other outside users from throwing their stuff over, because I think some of the overflow comes from that, other people are, borrowing this as a garbage storage space. And then now another detail showing this brick curb that mediates the sidewalk level change, and then the full height grills, which will be locked, and then the garbage bins will be parked within there.
Just a kind of question about that. So the garbage bin, I'm just sort of thinking school time in September, when it's still 90 degrees in New York sometimes, right? And it's the refuse from the kitchen that's doing all kinds of strange sort of outdoor cooking. Why can't you include in this some sort of an extension on the building, since it's still within your property line, that includes a refrigerated enclosure for that kind of fetid garbage?
Right. Well, the garbage really doesn't sit out for a long period of time in any case. It's taken out typically the morning that it is picked up. So with that, it's a very shallow space, to tell you the truth. It's about 3 feet deep. There's just a slab and no foundation under it, and I think to really fully refrigerate it, we would need to build in a container with an insulated thickness. We would need to develop a system, an air conditioning or ventilated system that would feed that, which would require shafts up to the roof, probably more rooftop refrigeration type equipment, or perhaps even through wall type conditioners, but I don't think that's desirable right at the street level. It's quite shallow, and we have new columns landing in here with brace frames, so I think, really the amount of space we have to work with right now works for the bins themselves in these areas, but if we started creating a real room within that, I think we would end up with something that wouldn't fit the steel container, a trash bag appropriately.
So, just so that I'm reading this correctly, it's a little faint, but you've got, it's because they're sort of compartmentalized, because you've got structural elements that actually come down to the ground there. So you've created sort of these little compartments. Each compartment has an entry from the street, or you're expecting those little garbage containers to come in from the inside to this space?
Okay, so just to clarify, it is a complex little zone here. The property line is right here. These existing dark piers in this wall are existing concrete, which remain. We're dropping new columns, which are these eyes that occur on the grid lines. Those are supporting the new building above. And then there are brace frames that run diagonally between some of these columns. So we've worked with the engineers to basically carve out, eliminate some of the brace frames in that area, so that this is really the area we're focused on for the kitchen garbage. These areas are really, we do have access doors, and that's largely just these ones are a little too small for the garbage. They become too small with the brace frames. You'll see there's only about 2 feet behind that column in the concrete wall. We also have the curb up pretty high there. So these are really just space that's accessible. We have the access door so we can clean it, so we can keep it properly. Nothing really. We're creating an aesthetic screen as a street level improvement, and we're providing access so that we can clean appropriately behind there. But we're not expanding the conditioned space of the school in this area. And it's again partly because this is the existing wall of the kitchen. There's a lot of equipment that backs up to this wall, and we're not disturbing that kitchen because it's not within the scope of this project.
And you're not venting into that space from the kitchen in any way, that your new...
There are some existing ventilation, some louvers up at the top here, and those will remain operable. There are some clerestory windows, but we'll be basically replacing this fence with a new visual screen that goes from this concrete beam down, and then the start of our new facade is at that edge. We're basically covering that whole thing. So it's, for the eastern part, it's more of a visual screen and just a street level improvement, and where we do have the ability to create the depth for the garbage bins, we provide them behind that screen.
But that new grill will be able to accommodate the vented air that is now...
Yes, we preserve the amount of openness.
So you're not going to
there.
get anything stuck in that little space.
Correct, absolutely, right.
All right, any other questions? Other things to present? Thank you, that was very informative. Any other questions here?
Yeah, I would just note that with respect to the terrace, our current proposal does show the terrace not being accessible. We will submit a CCD1 request to the Department of Buildings to request that we be allowed to make it accessible. If the department grants that request, we propose to make a request to the board by letter that such a change would be substantially in accordance with our plans and deal with it in that manner.
Okay. And I just had one other comment, actually. I think it's Commissioner Montanez had a comment about sort of surrounding materials on the roof. You wanted to just talk
Right,
about that?
just in terms of, you have a guardrail, I guess, along the loggia frontage, and then you have another guardrail at the height of the turf, and then you have the netting behind. I'm just concerned about, what the guardrails will be composed of, and that it's something aesthetically pleasing. And
I'll let the
doesn't go
appropriate
against
person
everything you're trying
answer
to
that.
do.
I think that's also open for negotiation. We have certain code-required parameters. We need to make sure that it's up to 42 inches high, that it's safe, and even if this area in between the netting and this terrace is really just, visual green space, we still need to provide access for maintenance and other reasons. So that little railing that you see there, I think we will explore with the tenants, and it could be glass, it could be painted steel, it could be something very simple.
There's another guardrail right at the column line, correct? So that you don't fall off the terrace?
Correct, right, so that would
There's
go,
another guardrail.
that's right, you'll be within this plane, so if you're standing here, you don't fall into there. So, right, we do have a couple layers, and I think we want to, again, it did come up in some of our conversations with the tenants, and we're happy to continue those and come up with something that makes them feel comfortable using that space and preserves the light and air again.
Okay. And then I think we received, you probably did too, a submission from the tenants showing some of the sort of existing surrounding materials. There's sort of chain link fence related to the brass pavilion and some ducts and so on that are in bad shape. So as long as you're doing this kind of general aesthetic overhaul, if you could take a look at those things too and bring them up to the same standard. And the other part of it is, for instance, the bulkheads, they should be designed to withstand the impact of balls and so on, so that in future, there's no reason to install a cage protecting the bulkheads, as an example.
Absolutely, yes.
Right. And that the materials of the bulkheads, again, understanding that everyone's going to be looking at them from the loggia level, the fifth floor, and so on, they should be something that's desirable to look at and not just kind of asphalt roofing, et cetera. Okay?
Absolutely.
Okay. So any other comments, questions from here? Are there speakers on this item?
Yeah.
Okay. I know there's a presentation, actually. Hi. How are you, sir?
We're not going to be outdone. We're going to have our own slideshow. Probably more aesthetic. I'm Al Butzel, by the way. I represent the Trinity House Tenants Association and a number of the neighbors who live across 92nd Street as well as the building on 93rd Street. Now, we're doing the usual, nothing like mechanical setup. Looks like we're getting there. I want to run through the issues that we've been particularly focused on from the beginning and make some comments as I do. And I will just, great, we're just about to start. All right, making a slideshow. Right up there. Okay. You get rid of bingo? All right, our first issue is the impact on Trinity House, which is very significant. And this is an image of the balconies and the loggias, so you really understand what it is. And this is a design that was integral to this project when it was first approved. And the open space requirement in part was met through the loggia and the balconies. As you probably are aware, there is no open space available to Trinity House. All of the open space is occupied by the school. So this was the effort to try to provide some of the required open space. And so that I want you to understand. That's what it looks like, that's what it is, and we'll show you in a moment how it'll be affected next. This is a view from the balcony, unobstructed kind of view, no columns, no anything like that. It's not a very good picture, but it gives you a sense of what's there. Next. This is a view from the loggia, giving you a sense even, this does not go all the way up to the top of the entryway, so it's somewhat confined, but it's the best we could do at this point. It also gives you a very clear sense of what this project was from the beginning, what people had thought they were getting in return for $4 million plus of federal dollars, mortgage guarantees and other things, and a school below it for Trinity. This is the perspective view, which is, I've tried to make it a little more realistic because I only have the applicant's view to use. We don't have an artist, but 20 feet is minimal. I mean, the chair at one point referred to this area as a dark shadowed hole, which is significantly what it's going to be, even if it's fussied up and the like. And our goal from the outset has been to make a 30-foot removal. That's not asking for the world. It's asking for a clarity and a more of an opportunity for people to be serviced by basic light and air. And you can say anything you want about this pretty little picture that they're being presented, but that's not going to have much reality when you're looking from where these new relocated facilities are going to be. Next, John. Now, this is just taking the first picture and showing you some of the implications of what's going to happen. The access of the balconies, they're supposed to go. Whether they can is another matter, but they're supposed to go. And then you can see just above that, the light line, the height of the turf, because the turf itself is above the loggia. Then the height of the fence and the bulkheads. And finally, the height of the enclosure, which obviously wouldn't impact this particular area, but I just wanted to give you a sense of how it will affect the apartments in terms of their looking out on the enclosure. Next, John. I have spent a lot of time in my written submissions talking about programmatic needs and trying to make a distinction between programmatic needs and programmatic desires. And I thought these statistics were just helpful. There are 1,000 students currently. The school has stated very clearly that it has no plans to expand. There are 28 current classrooms and labs for the upper school. There are projected to be 46 classrooms and labs for the upper school. A zero increase in the upper school students and in all students for that matter. A 70% increase in the classrooms and labs for the upper school. We have had today introduced the idea of a student study hall. What it is a 5,000 square foot student lounge. That's how it's identified on the plans, and that's what it intends to be. It's not enclosed. It wouldn't be a study hall. Wouldn't provide that kind of privacy. But there it is. It's right there, 5,000 square feet. And what would it take to increase the setback to 30 feet? It would at most lose 2,000 square feet of the expansion space. And what if it did cut back one classroom or one lab? this is not the end of the world. I have no doubt whatever that the architect who gives you such deals up here would figure out a way to squeeze in either the classroom or the lab or both without any difficulty. But, you know, we get these complicated presentations and it loses sight of what's involved here, which is, must this be done? Because the impacts on Trinity House are significant. They're significant even if this was never added any part of the expansion. The Tenants Association hasn't challenged the expansion. It's just asked to have more light and air and 30 feet, and there's no reason why it shouldn't have it. Next, John. And then there are these issues regarding the large-scale plan, and equally important, the agreements that Trinity has with New York City, which we will be addressing with HDC and HPD and the City Planning Commission in time. But what right does Trinity School have to remove those balconies, which are part of the light and air and open space that was provided in the original plan? Those balconies have been there for 45 years. To argue that the Trinity can just sweep them away, the school, take them without doing anything after 45 years, I find difficult to accept. What right does it have to block the loggia to the degree it will? I'm not sure, I don't know. But I know one thing, that it's not just zoning here. There are also commitments and agreements that have been made, and there are property interests and property rights. The balconies are part of Trinity House. They're not part of Trinity School. And yet the school just assumes that it can sweep them away. What right does the school have to construct new supports and mechanical spaces in the Trinity House cellar and reduce the garage space when that space is under a 99-year lease to Trinity? Not the school, but Trinity House. You know, it's just, there are interests here, property interests that have been, in my mind, ignored, and which I think you should take into account, and certainly others should take into account. We'll move on to the garage. Just wanted you to see what the garage entrance actually looks like. And you probably know, but it took me some time to figure out, there is no connection between the upstairs of the garage and the downstairs of the garage. This is not a circulating garage. If you're downstairs, you have to use this exit on the right, both for entry and for exit. Or if not you, the attendant has to use it for entry and exit. And as you can see, the main entrance is shown on the plans to be 17 feet 6 inches. And in some studies that the school did, the recommendation was that it was to be increased to 20 feet in order to conform with DOT requirements. The entry on the right is far less wide and clearly is only available for one-way traffic, at least through the gate itself. Next. Here again is another shot, and it gives you some dimensions. You can see the car emerging from the garage on the right. You couldn't stick two cars going in different directions there. That's all you have. And you can see on the left how the main entrance is being used. And this is an issue. I mean, you're required to conclude that this is not going to have a significant effect on adjacent properties. This garage is directly across the street from 5 or 6 brownstone residences and their tenants and owners. And this is what they get. Go on to the next one, John. This is what you have. You have parking on the sidewalks outside the garage. You have a car on the right that's trying to get in, the car in the middle that's trying to get out. And this is not an irregular occurrence, it's a regular occurrence. Next. This was another day, just more parking on the sidewalk. You know, there should be reservoir spaces, but there aren't. And I think the school has recognized the problems because now they're relying on grandfathering. But you're not bound by grandfathering in terms of analyzing the impact that this has on the surrounding neighborhood. Let's move on. Another occurrence, not necessarily common, but frequent enough. This is 92nd Street. Go on next. I'm just going to run you through the garage and what's happening to it very quickly. This is the existing first floor. You can see the configuration. The configuration was created as self-park place. That too was part of the original deal. It's not having it, attended park with all kinds of crowds and things out on the street, but it's self-park where drivers would come in and leave with their own cars, driving their own cars. So there were 48 spaces, at least according to this chart. These are just the applicant's plans in the first floor. Next. This is the second floor, again, self-park, 54 self-configuration. This is the proposed first floor without I showing, you'll see it in a minute. 10 spaces are being removed from this. Next. Those are the 10 spaces that are being removed. Just going to disappear. We already have all this congestion out front, and here we are, we're going to remove those 10 spaces. Okay, let's look at the big cellar. 17 spaces. Let's show them the 17 spaces. 17 spaces being removed for mechanicals. Again, a question of how Trinity can just take over, the school can take over the garage. But that's between the two, 27 spaces in total, that's 25% of the available space, however you operate the garage. Next, John. This is actually the correct depiction of what's going to go on in the garage. And you should draw your judgment from this, not from a rendering. This is what the DOB and the city planning and the regulations require. It requires spaces that are 8 feet wide and 18 feet 6 inches, or 8.5 feet wide and 18 feet long. That's what these squares represent. That's what you need to park a car. And that's true whether it's an attended facility or an unattended facility. It still says, notwithstanding, every space will be 18 by 8 by 6. So that's what's shown on the first floor, and you can see it. I mean, you can see how everything's all blocked up. You get rid of 25 spaces, you're really not going to have enough room to park 106 cars, no matter what Trinity contends. Next, John. This is just theirs. I just didn't note the stop bar is still right at the entrance. Next. This is down below, makes it look very spacious. It helps that we don't know where the water tank went, but I'm sure the applicant must know, but that's what was originally in that area. You take away that, you take away 4 cars. Even under this plan, you couldn't get 106 in. Next. This is what Elise tells me is a hypothetical exercise that the AKRF people did if they were required, if the garage was required to conform to the current regulations without regard to grandfathering, which requires, among other things, 10 reservoir spaces, which are numbered here, as you can see. You can see on the left where it says widen entrance to 20 to provide minimum, whatever it says there. I'm not a very good reader. But this is what it would look like if we were trying to conform with present regulations. Next. You can see up there on the upper right, it says water tank, where it was at one point going to be. All right, that's, I just want to emphasize with regard to the garage issue is not an issue of pictures or diagrams. It's an issue of what happens on the ground across from people's homes and in the streets. And this is, I mean, it's apparent that the applicant is trying absolutely desperately to keep the 106 spaces because they're frightened to death that they will otherwise have to go back to city planning and get amendment of the plan. Well, they're going to have to do that anyway, in our view, and we're going to pursue that. But here, I'm appealing to your role in evaluating what the impact is on neighboring properties and on the general sense of the area. We'll turn next to the netting, or the enclosure space, as we call it. This is a very nice picture taken from a Trinity House brochure for their capital campaign. And all of us who've been on our side have been complaining frequently in our submissions of why we don't think it needs to be 36.9 inches high and why it doesn't require netting of 2 inches rather than 4 inches and the like. I wanted you to see this because, as you can see laid out on the turf there, the field, and there's a significant stretch. It appears to be more than 10 feet on the north side of the pier, of the turf, which is sort of out of bounds, whatever, showing you where the real activity is going to take place. That suggests to us that at the very least, this enclosure ought to be set back 10 feet from 92nd Street. We think there's been no showing that this would have any significant impact on the programmatic need. Setback would be more conform or in conformance with the zoning, which requires a 20-foot setback. You could put trees up there. You know, anyone who lives in Manhattan knows that trees on the roof are very frequent occurrences and quite lovely when you look up. That would buffer the sound, it would buffer the impact, it would improve privacy and the like. And it would also have the effect of slightly reducing the cage. So we want people to look at this seriously. I think that it's so easy to say, sure, why shouldn't the Trinity School have this special facility on its roof? But it does have impacts. There are people who live across the street. Next, John. This is the view from 125 West 92nd Street from the rooftop terrace. And then this is just the implications. And I think those lines are underdrawn. I drew them. They should be higher probably. But it indicates, and remember, they look like they're back against they are back against the building, but the building itself would be right in their face, of course, and the turf in its bubble would be right in their face, 65 feet away or whatever it is across the street. Next. Hand drawn by me, I want you to know, just to give you a sense of how different 2-inch and 4-inch is. Finally, we have never heard a word from the applicant on limits on the use of the turf. We put that in our first presentation, our second presentation, our third presentation, not a single word. We want no use of the turf after sundown, no unsupervised use of the turf anytime, no amplified sound at any time, no loud noise, or unreasonable loud noise, I guess one would say anytime. And no lighting except for the code-required emergency lighting. Whatever else, this is ought not to subject the neighbors to an elevated by 30 feet play field 70 feet across from where they live. That's really all I have to say. I think that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Buckle? Okay, thank you. Any other speakers on this?
Yeah, I think I'm going to go next. Saying I'll
Okay.
You're an equal opportunity employer here. I get paid how much per hour? How much is it paid?
We're still working on it. Hi, my name's John Durko. I am one of the owners of 125 West 92nd, which is Co-op Brownstone, immediately across the street from the garage. Most of the pictures shown of the garage are taken by me. These pictures here were all taken within the last week. It's not like that took a year or two to collect this. It's a regular chaos. Now, I am not a garage...
Mr. Durko, just take the mic.
I'm sorry.
I mean, I'll pick it up, but I'd just rather you be on the other side.
Sure. Okay. So, I am not a garage engineer, but we have had one speak. And the key, this school is hanging everything on operations as being the key to meeting the 106-car requirement. However, as Robert Caravello was clear, we are just suggesting a grid. They are in no way obliged to follow the plan. This is the existing garage. Now, I can't call it a reservoir, I'm not an engineer, but this sign right back here, see there's a please pull ahead, pull up, okay? This is appears to be a drop-off area, okay? Pull up, stop here. It always looks like this. Those are stored cars facing outbound. Does it look like it's being used as a reservoir or drop-off area? That's the operational or logistical reality of a for-profit garage. Next, please. Okay, Robert Caravello also stated clearly the garage will operate as it does today in terms of in and out operations, okay? As Al has shown, this is the way it operates. Impact to us, we've got slamming car doors at all hours of the night. The rearranging between upper and lower levels often happens in the evenings, okay? So this isn't just during the daylight. Blasting radios, and the drop-off area is on the sidewalk. So when someone opens their car door, if they've had their music loud, my bedroom is 40 feet away from here, okay? Horns and yelling. In the evening, this garage is a solid door. This one, it closes, it's a mesh grate, so you can see through it but not walk through it. People who pull up at night sit there and honk their horn. When that doesn't work, they get out and yell through the garage to try to wake the sleeping operator, and then crank up what is quite a loud 40-odd-year-old door mechanism, okay? When someone comes to pick up their car at 5 o'clock in the morning, and the car's not ready, we get some wonderful language and verbal arguments between the customer and the garage attendant. It's a great thing to wake up to in the morning. Let's go to the next slide. The school's attorney, and I recommend that everybody have a look at this and listen again to the presentation.
You only actually have 3 minutes for this, okay? So please wrap
So
up.
just very quickly, the school's attorney said these people, referring to the garage operators, are artists at dealing with these garages. That doesn't look like art to me. Next.
Please wrap that up.
Yeah, okay, so very clearly, CB7 has had some traffic fatalities recently. It is an upwards priority to address this traffic situation by allowing this variance and reducing the size of the garage even further. You're going to limit the options that we have when the police are actually on the corner, unlike absent, as Bobby Caravello testified. Okay, this can't depend on absent police. Thank you.
Sir. Next speaker, please. Oh, I'm sorry. We have a representative from Councilmember Rosenthal's office here. Oops. Careful. Al, stay standing. You want to give this to me, Al? Okie dokie.
Hi, thank you, Chairwoman. My name is Jason Harding. I am the Director of Constituent Services for New York City Councilmember Helen Rosenthal, District 6, where Trinity School and House both lie. I'm going to be reading a quote which I've also submitted to the Chairwoman and to the Commissioners, and I'll start now. Thank you, Chairwoman Marjorie Perlmutter and Commissioners for this opportunity to provide additional comments as you continue your deliberation of Trinity School's application for 4 waivers from provisions of the zoning resolution. Since the last public hearing on December 9th, 2014, my office has continued to encourage both Trinity School and the affected residents to continue their dialogue and work together toward a compromise that all parties can accept. Based on our conversations with both parties, that dialogue has not continued at its previous pace, and there remain multiple areas of disagreement upon which this board's thoughtful reflection is needed. I would like to first commend the school on changing their proposal to drop the mechanical roof vent to the same height as the third-floor ceiling, adjacent to the loggia, and creating a 20-foot separation between the edge of the turf and the western face of the loggia. Though this is a step in the right direction, it does not include a confirmed design for providing access to residents to this area as open space. I also have not seen any documentation that Trinity School is pursuing the necessary DOB permits for this plan. Without that provision as part of the plan, the tenants will lose public space that is inherent to the spirit and character of the Mitchell-Lama design, and that loss is unacceptable. In the latest drawings received by my office, the eastern bulkheads remain opaque, thus obstructing light, air, and views from the western area of the residential tower. In addition, my office has yet to receive a sufficient response as to whether the arch in their current truss structure is set at the lowest clearance allowed under DOB regulations, as to minimize the affected apartments on the lower floors. It is also unclear as to whether the netting and truss is designed to adequately protect pedestrian walkways from sliding snow and ice. With regard to the surrounding property, I share the board's desire to see alternative plans presented that would keep the kitchen garbage held inside the building in a refrigerated storage space. Finally, I would like to see more details about protecting the garage revenue stream and designating the valet office to a deeper, more interior part of the garage space to address noise concerns. Based on these conversations, I believe that additional options can still be explored to diminish the burden of this new construction on the community. Trinity School's actions to date give me confidence that they will engage in these conversations with the affected residents, and I would urge Trinity School to use the submissions from residents on January 2nd and today as the agenda for the remaining issues through additional meetings. The feedback from this commission today will serve as a critical foundation for conversations going forward. In closing, I would like to I look forward to continuing to work with both the applicant and the community on finding a solution that works for all. Thank you for your consideration. Helen Rosenthal. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
My name is Jim Paul, and I'm co-chair of the Trinity House Tenants Association. Thanks again to the BSA for your thoughtful review. First, I want to talk about the pushback issue, and in our most recent submission, we were talking about ways to do that other than to bring the eastern part of the building down to the hallway wing floor level. And what we suggested was moving around some rooms and to bring some actually over into where the corridor is, some rooms that would be not classrooms, but other kinds of spaces like toilets and so forth. And so we really would urge that there be continued investigation of that possibility so that a 30-foot pushback could be realized with really minimum loss of program space for the school. Secondly, I want to just respond to the school's and the school's architect's insistence that there's been regular conversations about the building. It's true we've been glad that we had an opportunity to have some discussions with the school. However, the school has not consulted us about details in these, like fencing and all that sort of thing. And I'm glad that that matter came up because there are several of these barrier fences. They're needed. We're not opposed to them, but we'd really like to see the school ask us to comment on different options. Thirdly, the guardrail business, there's a lot of talk about how this is at the guardrail height, and guardrail has been sort of a flexible concept, and actually the guardrail that we're going to be confronting, as I understand it from the most recent plans, is set at 4'10", and actually the present guardrail all the way around is 4'6". Now, 4 inches is important, as you all know, and so let's get serious about what is the guardrail and what is going to be the interface. Access to terrace, we really want to make sure that we get that access, and we're very worried that somehow that's going to disappear. Bulkheads, please consider a glass treatment for the bulkheads. Those bulkheads are really very big blank walls, and they're going to block a lot of light and air coming into loggia. The school is already building in glass. We know that glass is going to be perfectly suitable in terms of all the different elements of this thing, in terms of being able to withstand impacts and so on. So please, let's look at that again. And as for car parking, I want to say that I've studied this very carefully. There are new doors along the eastern side for the mechanical rooms. There are 3 doors there, and those doors do not have access now with this current plan. I believe that the school would have to remove a couple of cars from its numbers, and that would be the end of 106 cars. I know it's a little bit like arguing about how many angels can fit on the head of a pin at this point, but really the school is very insistent on this 106, and so the school has to be responsible for things like how do you get into a door in a particular part of their plan.
If you could wrap up, please.
Yes, absolutely. And I do just one more thing. As far as the garbage is concerned, I have to walk down there and along with my fellow tenants, and that is not, we're glad that the school is working on it though, and maybe we can find a way to clean this thing up because it's really a mess right now. Thank you very much, Commissioners.
Next speaker, please.
Hello, my name is Judy Jacobson. I've lived in Trinity House since 1978, and I've had a spot in our garage for my car since 1978, when it was self-parking. Then we had our own clickers to enter and leave with open aisles in order to do so. First, I'll talk about the current conditions in the garage. You've seen a lot of it today. Now the garage is full on both lower and street levels. There's no space of any kind to move my car without moving quite a number of other cars. Thus, several cars are moved out of the garage onto the sidewalk while I wait for mine to be ready in the space just outside the garage entrance door that you've seen pictures of. When my car is delivered, it's brought out onto the sidewalk, and it is there where I must load anything into it that I have, even when it's raining and snow and other inclement weather. Now I'll address concerns about the school's garbage storage on 92nd Street. It's a hazard and source of grievance. There's greasy liquid from the garbage bins. I don't know how a curb is going to keep that from spilling out. And often it's a very offensive odor coming from this spill-off as well as from the open grates above at the kitchen level. There's sometimes bits of garbage on the sidewalk inside the fencing surrounding the bins, and occasionally there are bits of garbage on the sidewalk outside the bins. Neighbors believe that this garbage situation has contributed to the rat infestation on 92nd Street. I personally have seen rats scurrying from the garbage bins out onto the sidewalk and into the street. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hello. Thanks for taking our concerns. I live at 125 West 92nd Street.
State your name.
Lauren Rosenthal, and we are, just to clear, I don't know, the air, we're a small self-managed co-op. We take out our own garbage. We shovel our own snow. Anyway, I live across from the garage, and none of us can sleep at night without noise machines and earplugs. I have 2 boys. because there's so much noise. There's honking, there's also a telephone in the garage right by the front door that rings incessantly. There are people screaming at the garage attendants, and there are the garage attendants having conversations outside the garage in the middle of the night, and you can hear every word inside, not clearly, but enough for us to sometimes come to the window, open the window, and say, "Could you be a little quieter out there?" And they go, "Oh, I'm so sorry," and they go back inside. And we have the same issue with the cafeteria workers as well, and 18-wheelers driving up at 5 in the morning, delivering large amounts of food very noisily, and having a lot of conversations outside. But just the 18-wheeler driving up and putting on the brakes is enough to wake us up. And I am also a little confused because I thought this was a residential block and it feels pretty commercial. And when I think of parking garages, I think of a business with a net yield of 5, 6, 7%. And I hate to do the math, but with 1,000 students, I reckon the school is taking in $40 million a year. And here I am thinking it's residential zoning. I don't know, maybe I'm mistaken. Anyway, the noise is difficult, the garbage is difficult, the rats are quite terrifying. We actually had one show up in our building this year, giving me a heart attack. And there's also light pollution from the garage and the little lights placed over the garbage area as well. So can't sleep with the shades up or the windows open. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you. I think there are more speakers. No? Yes, one more speaker.
Hi, my name is Beverly Bergand. I'm a tenant at 134 West 92nd Street. What that means is I'm probably the only one who actually knows what it's like today to live on this field. I can step out my 3 eastern-facing windows face the field. I've lived there since 1992, and I work at home. So I'm familiar with the noise of the kids out on the playground, and it's a very noisy place to live. But it really is not the kids during the day that is most intrusive. There's actually a lot of activity that goes out on the field after hours, before hours, leaf blowers, snow blowers, fundraising picnics with barbecue pits right under my window. And actually, my husband and I took videos during the month of October and November. Even though there's no light on the field, there was a glow ball competition that went on a couple of nights a week, every week, for about 6 to 8 weeks, until about 9:30 at night, with large groups of adults and kids yelling, playing. Like, we have nothing against people playing. We've lived with the kids and loved the sound of the kids, for years. We're going to kind of miss it when we lose our windows. But it's nevertheless, seems to me that Trinity is not very aware of the fact that they have a neighbor on their field. And it's been very intrusive and loud often. So in addition to the garage, it's for the new people who are going to be close to the field, it's a life-changing experience to live on that field. And there's absolutely no bones about that. We do have video. I wasn't sure how to present it today. But it's intrusive, and it goes on all the time into the after hours. And oftentimes, I do not see supervision. So addressing the points that I know Trinity House has with regard to what's going on in the field, going to go on in the field in the future, it would probably require an attitude adjustment on the part of Trinity in the way they're using the field currently. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. No more speakers? Do we have any other speakers? No. Okay. Hey, can you respond to some of those issues, please?
We'd be happy to answer any questions that the board has at this point. I think a number of the comments made we've already responded to in our submission, so I'd be happy to respond to any.
So Trinity, the school, is in charge of the garage, is that correct? Is the school?
The garage is leased to an operator, as most garages are in the city of New York. The school does not receive any money from the garage. That actually, the money from the garage subsidizes the rents at Trinity House. So the school does not.
Who manages?
The garage
who is the lessor of this garage? The lessor is the Trinity School, or?
No, it's actually, the Trinity House is technically
Trinity House is
the
the
lessor
lessor.
to the garage operator.
So in
Yes.
fact, it's Trinity House that is supposed to be managing its tenant? Is that-
Theoretically, but as I think you know, Trinity House and Trinity School are, in terms of their, are owned by the same, are actually owned by the same
This bigger
entities.
entity
Yeah.
that is really the Trinity School, right? No, the question is, when you have a bad tenant, who's the one who actually calls
Well,
up the
okay,
tenant
I
and
mean,
says, quit
look,
that?
this is an existing garage.
Right.
It operates in a certain way. We're not changing the garage. It will still be a garage which is permitted to have 106 spaces. The way the garage operators, I can't comment on how they are running the garage. I think it's probably similar to many garages in the city of New York. And
Right, no, but so, I guess the question, because I'm not
Sure.
really understanding, who is the effective landlord who can say to the tenant, you're behaving badly, and I'm going to, whatever, I'm going to throw you out and get somebody else unless you change your behavior? Who's the
Well,
landlord?
obviously, there's a lease, as there are in most garages,
Right.
but it is Trinity House, which, as you said, is effectively in terms of the people, is the same people who are running Trinity School.
They're the
As
same
of today.
people who are running Trinity School. So the issue is, we have apparently a garage operator who is not, whose operation is becoming a nuisance or is a nuisance to the neighbors. So who do we speak to about making sure that the garage is operated properly so we don't see all of these complaints?
Right, so the garage lease is approved by HPD, and everything that happens there is within the control of HPD. And
But
I cer-
HPD doesn't call up the garage operator and say
That
you're
is
doing a
correct.
bad job.
And I would suggest to you that there are sort of two sets of issues here. One are physical issues that I think come up in many older garages in the city of New York.
Right.
And that's something that we're not changing to the extent it has an impact on the neighborhood. The physical configuration, that's not something that's changing. To the extent you're talking about things like people, the operator being loud or doing things in a way that is
Parking on the street instead of in reservoir spaces, for example.
right, that sort of operational issue certainly could be, the garage operator could be requested to.
By whom? Requested by whom? That's what I'm trying to get at.
Well,
Who makes the phone call?
I think the answer actually is that as long as they are operating, look, a phone call can be made, but from a point of view, I think, of the board and Trinity School and Trinity House, if they're not operating in accordance with law, in other words, if they're utilizing the street in a way they shouldn't, it's really the police department that has to.
No, let's
Okay,
go back. It's
so
not gonna be
I'm trying to
police
understand.
department. I'm trying to understand, so I'm the landlord, and
Right.
I have a really bad tenant, and and the neighbors are complaining to me, landlord, that your tenant is misbehaving. I have the responsibility as the landlord to contact my tenant and say, they're in violation of the lease, actually, and unless you behave otherwise, your lease is now void and I'm finding somebody else, right? So I want to know, who's the landlord?
Trinity Housing Company.
Trinity Housing Company. Is that your client?
For the purposes of this variance,
No,
my
I actually
client
asked
is-
you, is that your client?
My client is Trinity School.
Trinity
We have
School,
been,
right.
but I think I would be proper in saying that the lawyer for Trinity Housing Company has been consulted throughout on this, and it's the school that's making this proposal. I certainly, I feel that you're struggling to figure out if there's a way within the scope of this variance that you can feel that everything is being done here to make sure this is operated properly. And I
But
certainly.
part of it is you saying that you're not making any physical changes to the garage, but in fact you are, right? You're reducing.
The interior.
Yes, so potentially it could worsen the activities on the street because there's not as much room to pull in for reservoir, which doesn't seem to be used anyway. It sounds, really what it sounds like is the operator's doing a bad job, and though there are reservoir spaces now, they're not using them.
Well, I would suggest that the board could require Trinity School to consult with and request Trinity Housing Company to demand that the garage operator operate in accordance with law. And I think we would be comfortable with such a restriction.
So is a human being who sits on the Trinity School Board the same human being who sits on the Trinity?
Ari Shalom, who's sitting right here listening to everything
Okay.
you say, is listening carefully, and he is a person with who makes himself very, very clear. And I believe... You're correct.
Can you come up, please?
Ari.
I'm trying to get to the humans, not the entities. State your name for the record.
Ari Shalom, I'm a trustee of Trinity School. I'm also on the Trinity House Board, and I am obviously a Trinity House School. So the Trinity School owns Trinity House. Trinity House is an independently regulated entity that is controlled by the city. So from a practical standpoint, Joan Dannenberg, who you saw kind of coming up, and myself, and other board members as time to time switch on the real estate committee of the board, administrate some of the high-level affairs of Trinity House, and it would be our responsibility to renegotiate the lease, our responsibility to put the correct provisions in the lease if the lease is not being enforced correctly, and from a practical standpoint, to pick up the phone, call the lawyer who represents Trinity House, because there is a little bit of a legal separation, and say, get the guy to enforce the lease better. The good thing is that as part of this process, Trinity House is going to have a new RFP for the garage after the work is done, because the garage has to shut down during construction. HPD has full approval rights on that. So I would suggest that the proper avenue for these complaints go through HPD, and when the RFP is issued, better rules and regulations are added to the lease to enforce that. If there is a violation of law, then the appropriate entities for tenants or occupants across the street to call is some of the various city agencies which deal with quality of life, whether it's garbage or it's traffic congestion or parking on the sidewalk. Believe me, the city is very quick to come and give violations on all those matters.
We just don't want to rely on the city's enforcement because they're busy doing other things, right? We want to make sure that as part of the terms of the lease, it's very clear that there can't be obstruction on the street that are caused by cars that are basically parking on the sidewalk because they're not being properly installed in the reserve spaces, et cetera, et cetera.
Rick, you really have two things going on. You have a quality of life issue, which affects tenants of Trinity House and non-Trinity House.
Right.
But then you also have the revenue stream, which offsets the rents. It's about a third of the income of the building, and the Trinity House tenants are very focused on not having that rental stream impinged. As we have said, and HPD is already involved heavily, the rental income stream, to the extent that when the RFP comes out is less, will get subsidized by the school as long as it needs to be, and that's already documented. That's a different purview than here, but that's already done. And as Mr. Butzel said, he's very focused, and Mr. Paul, on that part of the process, which is actually next. They won't really finish until we're done.
Thank you, that was very helpful.
Perfect, thank you.
Maybe it would be helpful if you could give us just a little paragraph describing that relationship so we can be really clear when we write a resolution, et cetera.
We will provide that in writing.
We're asking to do what? Okay.
Absolutely.
Great. And then, I think my other question just had to do with the truck deliveries. I think the deliveries of school supplies and so on, obviously, that's a congestion problem in part because of the garage. So it seems as if where all the cars are sort of lined up to park in the garage, there's not room for a truck to make its deliveries. So all of that kind of thing really needs to be regulated better by the school. You know, in other words, that there needs to be some kind of superintendent who's out there and when there are deliveries to make sure that the truck is not part of the traffic flow and then it's, you know, all that kind of stuff, right?
Understood.
Okay. Any other?
I just had a follow-up question about the garbage issue and this new enclosure, just to make sure some of the residents had said that they experienced sort of oozing and sort of liquid coming from garbage, which is not abnormal. So I just had a question, is there a drainage system that is going to be included
Yes.
right? So, and I would imagine then cleaning, utilizing some sort of spray or, disinfectant happens on a daily basis, so that we could sort of try to eliminate sort of the rat and smell and ooze problem, which would,
Understood.
right?
Understood.
Regarding the list of conditions that was up on one of the slides, they sounded reasonable to me, and I believe they were in line with statements you've made before, so do you have any problem with them being conditions of the grant?
I think the only one we had a problem with is loud noise. I think that's too vague. I think that was on Mr. Butzel's list, and I really think that would be inappropriate because I think it's impossible to define loud noise. But the other conditions about the lighting should only be emergency lighting, the space should be.
No amplified sound, no amplified
yeah.
music.
I think that's what the issue was, amplification of sound, not children shouting.
Okay, so, yeah, so I think, the amplified sound, I think there are times when the school occasionally has events there and people might give a speech or something like that. So I think, is that the only time you use amplified sound? Correct.
But that occurs during school hours, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Occasionally.
John, you can't talk, yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Say your name, please.
John Allman, head of school. Occasionally, we have events, class events, after school hours. Again, before dark, because there is no lighting. We can agree with that completely. It's just emergency lighting that we'll ever have on
But in
that.
the kind of approaching summer months, or are you open in the summer? What happens in the summer?
Prep for prep, again, other organizations use the turf at particular
So in summer
times.
months, that could be as late as 9 o'clock, right?
Again, not for Trinity School, but for.
For the use of
but-
that
but for the-
turf, so
for,
that's late already.
Right.
That's
I
annoying.
don't think they would typically be using amplified sound. I don't know their program well enough to know that they'd ever do that.
Right, but what
We,
if
as a school, might have events in the spring when we might have a speaker. I mean, have someone speak for a few minutes and use
And at
amplified
what time
sound.
would that kind of thing occur?
7:30.
7:30. Okay, so what if we were to limit, we have to talk about what that would be, but what if we were to limit the amount of time that the amplification could be used, the time limits, so that it wouldn't be past 7:30 at night or something like that?
I mean, I think we'd love to work and be flexible with the way in which the speakers are directed, to try to
You're
make
not
sure.
installing a sound system in any way.
No.
So this would just be a little portable thing.
Correct, and
So,
it typically
I guess if
is,
there were some
4
restrictions
or 5
on-
minutes, the way we position it, the number of times we could, the number of times this might happen, we could set some parameters to do it. It really is the exception rather than the rule that we would ever have amplified sound or that we'd have any event on the turf after dark. I mean, we're talking a very small number of events.
Okay, so you know what, maybe what you could do is make some suggestions about how to restrict that, which is reasonable, that the neighbors could take a look at, and then we could include that in the conditions.
Absolutely,
Okay?
we will do that.
Okay, so in terms of Mr. Butzel, he'll take a look at the proposal, so we'll have a work. Right, but a school is an iterative process. Schools are, we're going to draw as firm lines as we can within the parameters of this board's abilities.
And I think, I think you heard testimony at the first hearing from Prep for Prep. The school does want, as much as possible, to allow organizations like Prep for Prep to be able to use
Right, but they have to work within the same parameters.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah, so I understand you don't know their program, but at some point, we're going to have to say no lighting after X hour, no noise
That's not a
after
problem.
X hour. Okay.
And there is no lighting except for emergency lighting, and that has not
Right.
changed. And we will submit to you a proposal of proposed conditions with respect to the turf.
Right. But I mean, for instance, what Ms. Bergen gave testimony about living next door to the field and that there was activity at 9:30, that's too late, right?
Understood, and I
Right.
think that was not a Trinity activity, that was another community
Okay.
group using the facility. If
But
that can't happen in the future, I think we'll have to accept that. We understand that.
Okay, good. Okay, does anybody have any other comments? So, I think in terms of conditions that I want you to sort of think about, and maybe you could write something up with respect to these conditions, okay? The constant subject of working with Trinity House with respect to the design of the balustrade and the fencing and the access to that little terrace area, and so that you're going to continue to work with them, because that's not something we can kind of micromanage here, right?
Understood.
And then in terms of submitting us a copy of the CCD1, that where you're going to be requesting access for the tenants. So, and just in terms of the aesthetics of it, again, everything that's sort of visible from the loggia or from the fifth floor, for example, should be designed with the utmost thought towards its aesthetics, and even selecting high-quality materials, and even maybe with the idea that say the bulkhead that you're looking at is something that's appealing to look at, not just your average bulkhead. That's a design opportunity, actually. Again, we're not going to design it here, but I'm sort of the challenge to the architects, make it a design opportunity. It becomes sort of a sculpture on the roof that other people are looking at, right? And then with respect to the trash, I do appreciate that the architects have looked at alternatives, but of course the trash has been a source of nuisance to the neighbors. So to the extent that there are other kinds of technologies that might improve this, maybe there is something that you can use, some kind of, I don't know, because I don't know what the technologies are, but something that would lower the temperatures during the hot months, something that really seals the trash in, treatment for vermin on a regular basis, so you're not the source of rats, which is terrible, spraying for odors and all of that. I mean, the ideal really would be to get this thing to be an interior space. And I understand your structural limitations, but so that would be something, again, it's a design challenge to work out so that you become desirable neighbors as opposed to offensive neighbors, okay? That goes, again, for the garage. So we saw all of those issues about the garage, and a great concern that if you're reducing the number of just the area within the garage, that you don't create a greater nuisance. So there'll be restrictions on what your garage operator is permitted to do, so nothing that will be a nuisance to neighbors, that increases congestion on the street. Maybe AKRF could look at how that might be controlled within the garage. And whenever you get a new garage operator, that has to be stipulated in the lease. And yes, and so HPD has to be made aware that this is an issue. That also that you have some kind of superintendent from the school who's working to make sure that school deliveries against garage activities are not causing kind of really undesirable conditions on the street in terms of congestion and noise and so on. And then, so as we said, the limits on the lighting and the amplified sound on the turf. And I think that's it. Anybody else? Did I leave anything out? Okay. So with all of those kinds of ideas, if you could write up something that just indicates that you're in agreement with those kinds of conditions and maybe ideas that you might have in speaking with the school and the architects to kind of promote this. And I think with that, we can close the hearing. Okay? Okay, so the first question is when you could submit. That's the 13th.
I think 2 weeks.
2 weeks. So if you could submit on the 27th.
Okay.
For a decision on the 3rd.
Okay.
Sorry? Oh, opposition, I'm so sorry. Opposition, yeah. So you submit on the 27th, and opposition, is the 3rd enough time for opposition to submit?
Not really.
Yeah. Is it okay? The 10th? Okay, and you can respond. If you can respond by the 17th, then we could close on the 24th. Otherwise, our next hearing is on the 3rd of March.
Okay, so, I'm sorry, can you?
So opposition will submit on, so you would submit on the 27th, opposition on the 10th of February, and either you could, if you could respond to opposition by the 17th.
We will.
Which is only a week, then we could just have a decision on the 24th of February.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure. Okay.
Can we do ours faster?
We can make our resubmission.
If you,
Hearing until
there's no hearing on, well, it doesn't matter. Oh, I see.
Yeah, we don't have another.
We don't, Ms. Wagner, we actually don't have a hearing on the 17th. We only have a hearing on the 24th, so I don't think the scheduling matters. If you did yours faster, I'd rather you really take a good look, but it's not going to make any difference because we have a hearing on the 10th of February and on the 24th, not on the 17th.
So it's not going to make a difference. Okay,
Motion?
so February 24th, very good.
Okay. Okay, so for a motion to close?
Chair Perlmutter?
Aye.
Vice Chair Hinkson?
Aye.
Commissioner Montanez?
Aye.
Commissioner Otley Brown?
Aye. Thank you so much.
Thank you very
everyone
much.
for coming.
February 24th is the schedule.
No, it didn't either.
Item number 14, 15513BZ, 1782 East 28th Street, Brooklyn.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Lara Gelman from the Law Office of Frederick A. Becker. We did submit an adjournment request requesting a submission today. Unfortunately, the plans only arrived after 7 o'clock last night, so the submission is not prepared to be provided today.
Good.
Would it be possible to submit next Tuesday, the 20th?
That's what I was hoping you would say, because we didn't actually have time for a hearing on the 27th. We were already packed. So if we
Glad I
could
could help.
adjourn. So thank you. So if you could submit by the 20th, and for a hearing on the 3rd of February.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item number 15, 18613BZ, 117 Gelson Avenue, Brooklyn.
Good afternoon, Frank Shalito for Harold Weinberg. There were some questions again yesterday. Okay.
Always look at the map before you submit it.
Well, I purposely did that. That map was from I believe it was 1921, and it was a horse stable, and I thought you'd find that interesting. Four
Oh, it
horses
didn't
and a
say
barn.
horse stable. I would have found that interesting.
Yeah, exactly.
But it wasn't a house, was it?
I don't know where it
Like
went,
a
but
vacant
it's
lot.
not there. I do have a recent copy.
Oh, great.
If we're concerned with, on this recent copy, showing the alignment of the front yards, this will do. And I'll be
Yeah,
glad
that's
to
all,
submit
because
that
you're just
now.
trying to establish that, because your addition is towards the front, you're just trying to establish that your building
Well,
is
this
in
will
existence
establish
at
the
that
building
location.
hasn't moved.
Yeah, okay, good.
Also, at the last hearing, you requested the garage be measured or a dimension on the garage, and we left it at that. You want a full set of plans for the basement, I'll go measure it up over the next day or two and submit it.
No, actually, it was simply that you had a basement plan in your first submission, and then in your last submission, you had all the other floors but no basement. It just didn't get submitted.
Double check that one.
Okay, because your zoning calcs show that you included the basement and you subtracted something for the garage. I mean, for the parking.
200 square feet.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there, just submit the basement plan, that's all.
I'll have it in 2 days.
Okay, great. And then, there was a correction to the balcony that was made at Commissioner Otley Brown's request. Are there any other questions about this? Are there any speakers on this item? So if you could just officially submit the revised maps, or the new
Like
maps,
now?
and the basement plan, then we can be done. So we can close this. So for a motion to close?
Chair Perlmutter?
Aye.
Vice Chair Hinkson?
Aye.
Commissioner Montanez?
Aye.
Commissioner Otley Brown?
Aye. Okay, so if you could submit this by next week, can you do that?
Not a problem.
Is it a problem if we do it at the 27th? Well, that's okay. And then we could have a decision on the 27th.
It's not the Trinity House hearing day, right?
What's the submission?
No.
Submission date is what?
Submission date, the 20th?
Oh, 20th.
No, definitely not. You're right.
Thanks. You want these now?
No, I want a cover letter explaining what those are along with the plan.
Very good.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you.
January 27th. Item number 16,
Thank you to you, too.
26413BZ, 257 West 17th Street, Manhattan.
Good
Good afternoon, Frank Angelino on behalf of BRIC. We have representatives of BRIC here to talk about the two specific issues that the board is concerned with, the ceiling, which has now been completed in all respects, and also on the flooring. So if I may.
Please.
Good afternoon. Hello. So, I'm sorry?
State your name for the
Jarrett
record.
Perlmutter?
Thank you.
Alrighty.
State your name, though.
Jarrett Perlmutter?
Okay, sorry.
Yes. So just to give some updates of where we're at, as Mr. Angelino had mentioned, the ceiling is currently complete. Last week, we went through the final inspection with the city to get it signed off.
When was it completed, though?
Last week.
Just last week, so there were open areas.
There were open
way.
areas.
Okay.
Yep, the final fire sprinkler caps and some of the other openings had been enclosed and then signed off by the city. So that was the first step. We did a preliminary test, I believe it was last week. Last week, while I was out of town, I was not privy to the actual testing, so I'll let Mr. Blank speak on that in just a second. But he will talk about the success of that in itself. We did want to just state, I know there were some questions on the recent increase in complaints that had been submitted to the board, and we just wanted to make it known and openly noted that at the same time as the complaints had increased, a new large retailer has opened directly next door to the building, Room and Board. They're a massive furniture retailer. They're 3 stories high. That tracks directly upside the building, which falls in almost exact unison of when the complaints have increased. I'm not trying to deflect any blame. I just think that we need to take into account all of the issues that surround us.
Are they in the building itself, or?
They're the budding building separated by a simple brick wall.
Building. Okay.
Twitter is taking, so Room and Board is 1 through 3 floors. 4th through above is Twitter, that's under a massive construction project right now to take over the rest of that facility above them. And we do know that the building shares adjoining the building is the service hallway of where all the furniture, we've been in there to kind of inspect and poke around. That's where all the furniture moves in and out of the building. That's where there's constant movement, construction, people are in and out, and they are pulling long hours. Again, this is just a detailed fact to build into this. As far as next step for us is concerned, we are already under design for the new floor. Just so you know where we are at the latest. Before the holidays, we're waiting for the ceiling to finish so that we could begin the cutting of the floor. What we've decided is that instead of wasting time on cutting floor and sampling, we have been given information that a system that was technology that hadn't been available when we built ours, fortunately for them, they used our mistakes to build what works for them, is a flooring system that's working in a very similar building in the exact type of concept that we have in the city, and we're basically now under design to take that and build it within our space. So it's already in with the architects and engineers that are doing what they do to make it fit within our space. So we will have to go through a complete deconstruction of what we have already and a reconstruction of a new flooring.
Can you submit us, or have your architect submit details on what that flooring system is?
Absolutely. I have a note here to let you know that we will be submitting that as we did for the ceiling for your review as well as approval. All right? Before any aggressive motion is taken on that. In addition, we did want to make a note that we took that comprehensive list of complaints that was sent just recently. We went through our date and time stamped videos. We have it on a thumb drive. We are more than happy to invite anyone from the board to sit down and review it with us. Of the complaints that were on that list, which probably total around 20, we noticed that the majority of them were in situations where there was nothing going on in our facility that would be able to generate noise, even to a point where there were no people on the floor or in any of the training areas where the complaints were occurring. So we believe that there is a massive issue of phantom noise. Again, we are not saying that those complaints are untrue. We're saying that they are not in direct relation to our space by proof of what's on video. We've also made note that if anything that may or may not, we would leave it to the judge's booth to decide. but it's so up in the air gray area, it would be hard to see, where there may be a few people. That is all on tape. We're more than happy to share it and walk anyone through it so they can see it. And that's on that. We took every complaint off that last sheet that came in, minutes before, minutes after, and on the time that they complained, figuring that maybe 2:59 on their clock is not 2:59 on the timestamp, and it's all on video for review, where you can see it with your own eyes.
I mean, ultimately, once the flooring is done and the ceiling is now done, you'll be doing more tests, official tests on the apartments, at the apartment level on your floor, so.
Yes, ma'am. Also to note that on one of those complaints was stated that every single Saturday, starting at 6 a.m., we start generating noise. Never in the history of our business have we ever been open at 6 a.m., nor are there people in there before about 8 a.m. So again, there is noise being generated elsewhere that if they're hearing something that's causing noise.
You open at 8 a.m., is that?
The exact time on Saturdays is about 8 a.m.
8 a.m.
It's before people even show up.
And what about during the week?
During the week, by 5:15 in the morning, 5:45.
Okay, but during the week you open?
Yeah, the complaint was specifically on Saturday.
Yeah.
Was for a Saturday. And then in addition to that note, I had one other thought that I wanted to mention on that. Oh, one thing I did want to state is the complaints generally state that there's loud booms and weight drops. And as Jared will attest, and when we do the actual professional testing, you will note that the loud booms at best that they could be hearing when we tested weight that's beyond anything that we use in the facility, that's the loud thunderous boom. And we would invite anyone to come on any given day to recognize that it has become a overly exaggerated concern. And our only hopes now is that through doing as we've been asked and we knew would work, putting in the ceiling, taking even greater lengths now to building a floor after changing the culture and the concept of what we do there, that we'd be able to get the invitation accepted to come down and recognize that some of this is well, either not our fault or just simply phantomed.
On one of your submissions, on the photographs that you submitted recently, there are these platforms.
Yes,
Are
ma'am.
those the weight drop platforms? Is that what those are?
Yes, ma'am. So
Pad?
even though we've reduced out of the culture of the gym the heavier weightlifting, we've maintained the protocol of the platforms for a just-in-case situation, as well as trying to prevent getting a sheet with 30 complaints on it. And so even with padding, even with the ceiling, even on days where there's no weights going on anywhere, we're getting 10, 15 complaints at hours where there's nobody doing anything.
Okay.
So it's very confusing.
And just a question about what you're talking about as a culture. So if you have a client who is, let's say, sort of sloppy in the weightlifting department, so that you have this no weight drop rule, but they're constantly saying, oops, I didn't mean to, but do they is the client reprimanded or told that, that's not permitted in the gym, something like that?
Yes, it's come to a point now where it's heavily frowned upon, if and when it would happen. Generally, those particular movements that would build up into that weight, we just sway away from even having participate in the gym.
Okay.
So things come from things that would have, in the past, and in an area where we have more freedom to perform, that would be done from the ground, taking a weight from the ground, lifting it up onto your shoulders overhead, and then released back to the ground. We now take from a set area, which is called a rack. We pull it off a rack, we deal with the movements, and then we place it back on the rack.
Okay, so you're at the lift position and then you put it back on
Back
the
on your
rack.
shoulders, back onto the rack.
Okay.
Whether you're squatting, lifting, or pressing.
Okay.
And we've gone even to the point where if they're jumping onto a box, we place yoga mats underneath them, where you could be standing next to it and you don't hear it. So we're uncertain if it's just impossible through testing.
Right. And, vibration's a different kind of a thing because you may not hear it at the source as it travels horizontally through the slab and up the sidewalls. That's where it's being heard. So you may not be able to hear the vibration at the source. That's what the purpose of the testing is.
Absolutely, 100%. We've tested every movement that we do. Even to the latest, we scheduled out numerous people to come in so that instead of just doing like a controlled single drop and just clapping our hands that it's perfect. We invited multiple people to come in at multiple different weights from different heights and levels and tried to replicate what would it look like during a regular class. And even then, as Jared can mention, it was absolutely a super success. I mean, just logically to put in 1.5 feet of materials, drywalls, and sheetrock to say that it's not helping, it's like physically impossible. You know? Talk without a pillow, talk with a pillow. There is something. Yes.
Right, okay.
All righty?
Great. Any other questions for Mr.?
The new flooring system that you're planning on installing, is this a continual flooring system or just individual pads?
This will be a flooring system that will make up the entire first floor area.
And what about the cellar?
The cellar area will be an extension off of that product. Because the cellar level is not as sensitive, there is a similar system, it's just not as massive. So like, we don't need to do the entire floor, we just need to do the edges where the actual exercise occurs. So like, there's a center part of the cellar level where we don't actually lift heavy, like would lift the heavier weights.
Plus, I would think that the material on the first floor will dampen some of the effects of vibration on the cellar level, as long as the walls and the columns are protected, so that it doesn't travel up those.
Yeah, any mass you add, and I'm no expert, just have been forced by this situation, but any mass you add assists in vibration dampening.
Just to clarify your operation, at this moment in time, you're not doing any drops of weights. Everybody is now putting, if they have a weight in their hand, it all goes onto...
It's either being placed on a rack or placed down onto those pads, a 6-inch foam pad.
But placed, not
dropped.
Not dropped.
Absolutely. 100%.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Maybe we wanted to hear from your partner about the testing that you did?
Yes, that's Jared Pearl,
Jeff.
We're all told on it. Jared Blank.
I know how you feel.
Thank you. Hi. Yeah, my name is Jared Blank. I'm a partner with Jared Perlmutter at Brick, New York. Let me just first say, because I also witnessed each and every instance from the RF security camera of the complaints that were offered on the 5th, 6th, and 7th, and many of them, there's simply nothing going, it's clear to the naked eye. I mean, you don't need any special tutoring from us. There's just nothing going on in the gym at all, so there's nothing going on that could cause an effect. But anyway, that was just stated. I just thought it would be reiterated. We did some additional testing a week ago today. We had twofold purpose. One was to test some new flooring, but that didn't work out. It's also beside the point. We also wanted to assess the effect of the ceiling. It was largely complete. There were a few bits and pieces that needed to be installed that were just installed, but it was largely complete last week. And it was a very positive result. We turned the music up to full volume, and it was not perceptible on the second floor in Unit 2B. We had yelling, which used to be a problem. We had a coach scream at the top of his lungs, and it was simply not perceptible. You couldn't tell anything was going on. We did.
Was it mic'd speech or?
No, we don't have mic speech, so yeah. We proceeded on to, we did some weight dropping, even though we're not trying to change our policy, but we wanted to see if the ceiling had an effect on the perception of weight dropping, and it did, and it did positively. At 95 pounds, which is a typical weight for one of our exercise periods, you couldn't perceive, and we, like my partner said, we tried to mimic the conditions in a typical class the best we could. We had multiple people dropping in a sort of constrained time period, and you couldn't perceive 95 pounds from any level at all. You could, unfortunately, at 135, and as also was mentioned, however, there was a subjectively perceptible effect, but it was incredibly diminished from what it had been before. It's just the ceiling is having the desired effect, and we never thought it was going to be the total solution. We always knew we were going to have to mess with the floor in one way or another, but we needed to finish our work on the ceiling and see how effective that was going to be before we knew how much work we had to put into the floor. And I'm just here to report that on our informal testing last Tuesday, it was a very positive result, and it's doing what we expected it to do.
So this was inside one of the apartments? 2B, okay.
One of the worst, that's
one of the worst,
yeah.
The worst. Okay, good. So, and obviously the future test would be done with machinery, with equipment.
I've been in touch with our sound guy, and he just wanted to make sure everything was completely buttoned up, and now that it is, and their sound guy's going to have to, we have to coordinate that, so.
Great. Any other questions? Okay, are there any speakers on this matter? Yes. There are, okay.
Hi, Jay Ginsberg of Lebanon Glasser for the condominium. The first thing I'd want to point out, just having just listened to the same thing you did, is the informal testing that was done in 2B. We just heard an interesting admission that they were using 95 pounds, and you could hear 135 pounds. The affidavits in Supreme Court said 25% of the people drop in excess, I think, of 180 pounds. And the prior tests, the data of which you've been provided with, already showed that at 95 pounds, there wasn't much problem to begin with. The real problems start at 135 pounds, and once you get up to 180, you're talking about vibrations that reach the 6th floor. So to hear that with the naked ear dropped on these new pads, you're not experiencing much at 95 pounds, isn't exactly terribly comforting to the condominium, unless they're going to remove all weights greater than 95 pounds. As long as we continue to play in the world of 135 and up, 180 and up, these informal tests mean little, if anything. In fact, their own expert, Wilson Ehrig, when they came and they did the tests, and we did it with weights between 135 and 180, noted the same thing that our expert did, that the vibrations were noticeable traveling throughout the building, as was the noise. And I don't think anybody on the board thinks that a drop ceiling is going to stop the vibration, which is traveling horizontally through the building and into the structure. And the basement is being dropped directly on slab and traveling horizontally and into the structure. That the drop ceiling, however thick it might be, is going to have any effect on the rattling of the structure. The flooring...
But just to remind you, the drop ceiling was one measure and the flooring is the next, right?
Right, there was just a suggestion that it somehow would help dampen the sound of the weight dropping, which is just not true. The flooring, we haven't seen a proposal on, I know you haven't either, so I'm not in a position to comment. As to the video, we very much would like to see the video, because in the past we've asked to see videos and only on rare instances have been provided them. The only thing we would like to do is to look at the equipment itself and make sure that the timestamp is adjusted for daylight savings time or winter standard time, to make sure that those timestamps correspond in a meaningful way with what we have. But we'd very much like to see those tapes and others. If they're amenable to it, we would ask that the board direct them that when we get drops, within 24 hours, give us the tapes. There's, I think, 6 cameras. We can see pretty much the majority of the space. If they want to be open and let us verify, then let us verify, instead of doing it a month after the fact. They have these things, why not provide it? We've asked, we haven't always gotten it. We have several other people here, if I can introduce them. Anthony, why don't you pick it up?
Chair, Commissioners, my name is Anthony Yu. I live in Unit 2B at 257 West 17th Street. You may recognize me, I've been here a few times before. I just wanted to highlight 3 points and share 2 observations with you. Point number 1, my quality of life still is impacted by the activities that go on in Brick. I don't know what activities those are because I have not been there, but vibration, weight dropping, clanging, whatever you want to call it, that these activities are kind of intolerable and, in my opinion, unreasonable for a New York City resident. That being said, I will admit that, compared to a year ago, certainly noise or noise-related issues have subsided. So music and et cetera that one of the Jareds alluded to. Point number 2, so what is actually being heard? I'm from California. Before I mentioned that some of the weight dropping is kind of like an earthquake. And then unfortunately, once you've experienced sudden vibration, your kind of body waits for the aftershock that may or may not come. In different terms, if you've ever played in a band, vibration that I mentioned in my letter to you dated January 5th is kind of like sitting on top of a subwoofer, kind of a low-grade buzzing that you feel. Weight dropping, and I think this could be attributed to also jumping on boxes or throwing sandbags or whatever, again, I'm not there. That is kind of more like a cymbal being crashed together, both in terms of audible sound and in terms of feeling. So while one is kind of like, your friend kind of pushing you, the other one is your friend kind of punching you. They both exist to varying degrees. And I think the response to my January 5th letter that you have received from Brick it says that anyway, my complaints are not due to things that are happening in their space. I think, I've lived in this apartment for 5 years. You know when your neighbor, sorry Sue, is yelling at their kids. You know when the person who lives above you is kind of, running around their apartment. You know where the sound is coming from. So, in any case. Point number 3, the frequency, it still is daily. The reason why some things, there weren't many end of December notices was because I was away in California. It was the holiday season after all. I just want to remind you in terms of frequency, this morning, in fact, after I got out of the shower and was doing my morning ritual, at 7:46, there was especially intense weight dropping. So kind of like a kind of thing. Not that loud, but you feel it. At 7:48, at 7:49, twice I put, 7:56, 7:58, at 8 a.m. So it's not always that intense, certainly. However, just to give you an idea, it's not just like once a day or once a month kind of thing. Point number 4, it's one thing during the day, which is annoying. It's awful to be woken up an hour before you want to wake up with this kind of constant weight dropping, etc. My time is up. Thank you for your time.
Just question, is it possible that the noise is from construction adjacent?
I do not believe so because typically I leave for work around 8 a.m. and it's my understanding that the building does not allow workers in before 9 a.m.
Not your building, the building next door.